Welcome back to this special edition of He's a Giant Pod. I'm your host, Sal, with my co-host, Monte, on the eve of free agency. What's going on, man?
What's going on, man? Got back from Mexico. I didn't get stolen by the cartel, but the sun fucking sucker punched me. So, yeah, I'm dealing with that now.
Don't let him lie to you. He was late, so I beat the shit out of him before the pod, and I made him get to turn it on anyway. That's what happens when you're late. Oh my god, you got a tribal mark across your damn face.
Dude, I've been saying, is anybody watch it on YouTube? I say I look like fucking Prince Zuko from Avatar: The Last Airbender.
Looks like the cartel stole your left cheekbone. Yeah. All right, man. Well, welcome back from Mexico. You didn't miss much, but it's been a week where we're just waiting for stuff to happen. But here we are, eve of free agency. I know there's a bunch of people putting out stuff tonight. We're going to try to do our best to keep up with everything. But tomorrow at noon is the beginning of the quote legal tampering period in the NFL, when news starts breaking of where everybody has signed. The official league season starts 4 p.m. 2 days later on Wednesday, but we're going to start hearing about free agents, where they sign as they change jobs tomorrow by noon. So until then, the Giants have a little bit more than 15 hours left to secure their own free agents before they hit the open market, like, so to speak. So let's get right into it. What are we expecting from the Giants as they head into free agency, Monty? I think we're going to go through a whole episode of actually breaking this down in some more detail, but big thoughts here. What are you expecting in the next, day or so?
Yeah, I mean, I think Jermaine Eluemunor is clearly a guy that they're hoping to get something done with. We'll see if it happens. I don't think Wan'Dale Robinson's coming back. It's been pretty much feel like the worst kept secret in the league that he's going to the Titans. And then I don't know, we'll see on Cor'Dale Flott. I think that's potentially still on the table. I could see him go another direction there, but we'll talk about that. But I don't know, the things that we've been hearing that's been rumored around / has been repeated sounds like they have some targets. Sounds like they want to address corner. That's a big need for them. They want to address wide receiver. That's a big need for them. They want to address interior O-line and interior D-line. Those are a bunch. And linebacker. I mean, fucking all over. It's like you're hearing this is a priority. This is a priority. They want to flip things over in free agency.
I think Joe Shane's such a great GM. I'm going to turn over the entire roster in 3 weeks. Yeah, that's kind of like what we're headed for. But let's start with where it always starts, right? So you can go crazy, thinking about all the different possibilities in free agency. I think you want to take a step back, and I'm assuming that John Harbaugh, Donna Ponte, even Joe Shane have sat down and kind of gamed this out. We've done our game theory episodes, and I think they've probably sat down and gamed out how they would take different approaches to free agency depending on how certain foundational benchmarks break, right? And I think if I'm trying to plan this out, my foundational benchmarks are my own free agents. And I think you start there. So the Giants have several impending free agents. I'm not going to get into every one of them because a lot of them are just scrubs, and we're not going to go into them. But the three big ones and a couple of other guys that are worth mentioning right now. Obviously, top of the list, Jermaine Eluemunor, our right tackle, Wan'Dale Robinson, wide receiver, and Cor'Dale Flott, cornerback. I think the outcome of those three is going to determine which way this goes for the Giants the rest of the way. Because if you don't spend money on one of those three or two of those three, that does open up dollars that you are going to be able to spend elsewhere. And you may not spend it at the same position, right? You may look for impact elsewhere. So let's start there. Let's start with the easy one first. Wan'Dale Robinson. It sure seems like he is not coming back, Monty, from all of the national reporting we're getting that Wan'Dale is coveted out there on the market. We kind of suspected this would happen after he had a 1,000-yard season. Brian Dable in Tennessee, they need a receiver. They really, really, really need to make sure that Cam Ward does not look like a bust this year with the new coaching staff. Wan'Dale is familiar with Brian Dable's offense and his play calling. Dable loves guys like Wan'Dale. He had, he's had guys like this before. So you have to assume that they're going to make him a big offer. I mean, I'm seeing all sorts of crazy rumors, but I think he's going to be sitting, my guess is somewhere in the $18 to $21 million range per year. That's my guess. And I don't think the Giants are going to pay it. What are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen even higher on stuff. Like I've seen rumors up to 25 million. Like we'll see. It's gonna be really interesting how it's gonna go. But no, I don't think we are.
Yeah, I just don't see I don't see Wan'Dale coming back here. I also don't think that I don't think that Matt Nagy would have a huge issue with him. I'm just not sure he's somebody that John Harbaugh would value at that price point. You know, would he want him on your team? Sure, like if he was under contract, sure, but I don't think you're going to break the bank on a guy like him. So I'm going to assume Wan'Dale Robinson is gone. You can cross that one off our list in terms of probable Giants for next year. I wish him well, good Giant for 4 years, got better pretty much every year. I hope he has a nice career wherever he goes, but I'm perfectly fine with the Giants not breaking the bank on him.
Yeah. It's unfortunate that we're probably going to spend too much money for that comp pick to count because he's going to be good for the comp formula, but wish him the best. I understand why the Titans would pay for him, but when you have a guy like Malik Nabers here, even coming off injury, it makes it a little bit easier to not spend that money at wide receiver.
Absolutely. All right, so let's go to the next guy, Jermaine Eluemunor. I think to a lot of Giants fans, he was and is the priority. The Giants haven't had a right tackle they can rely on since Kareem McKenzie. It's been that long, and Jermaine Eluemunor comes along and he just stabilizes it. I'll make my quick pitch for him. I like him. I think we know he's a good tackle, right? I think we would probably grade him out objectively as probably like a top 15 NFL right tackle, top 10 to 12 to 15 range, somewhere in there, right?
Somewhere in there, yeah, I'd say.
Probably top 5 to 7 as a pass blocker and a little lower as a run blocker. But overall, they're a very important cog. Here's something that's really important about Eluemunor that doesn't get talked about enough, Monte. He doesn't miss football games. Plays every game. And I think on a team where your franchise left tackle who's elite is, you could probably plan to have AT miss 2, 3, 4 games a year. That's been his career MO, right? Where he misses some games. Even though it looks like his most recent injury is largely corrected, I think you can bank on AT missing some games. Having a right tackle that, for the most part, is an Iron Man, I think is really valuable. He knows your system. He knows the city. He knows this team. He seems to love it here. He's 31. He's not like 36, 37. Keeping him would allow you to leave Marcus Bowe as your swing tackle, which, for the reason I just mentioned with AT, is really important. Guy you can rely on to be your swing tackle without having to go out and invest it and heavily in it. I think right now, with the way things are stacking, he is priority number 1. How do you feel?
Yeah, I think that's where it's going to go. I don't necessarily feel like that was always their priority, but I do think some things have changed. We've obviously have allowed new leadership in here between Harbaugh and Donna Ponte and things like that. But I do think that there's being a push made to bring him in. You heard Jermaine Eluemunor come out and say that he sees himself on the best right tackle in the NFL. Gave me a little bit too many Bobby Hart vibes, but it was less funny coming from him because at least you can argue that he can
make a push for it. Bobby Hart was delusional.
Yeah. So at least, but no, I all these guys should think that. So it's just a dual Giants PTSD. But no, he wants to get paid, man. I understand. He took the 2-year deal for this exact purpose. He wants the money. I think the Giants. I think also part of this. I think the Giants expected to get priced out of this market, and I don't think they are being priced out of this market. I mean, you heard Daniel Jeremiah talk about it as podcasts this week or last week about how essentially he was asking about the free agency, and they were talking about like, what he was talking teams. What do you think about Jermaine Eluemunor? And it was a hard stop. No, like they weren't interested in him. So I don't think the NFL necessarily sees him as highly as we do. So I do think I don't know what that'll end up being. I don't know if that will end up being 20 million. I don't know if that'll end up being 18 million. I don't know if that'll end up being 15, 14, but I do think that there's a point where the Giants felt like they would have to go to and don't have to go to anymore.
All it takes is one team, man. One team that values the guy and wants to prime away from you and says, I'm going to make an offer that's big, that has some money. So the 2 teams that come to mind, I don't think it's Tennessee, But the Raiders, who have, again, we're going to talk about the Raiders a lot. They have $120 million in cap space. They have to, by league rules, spend 90% of it. So that's about $108 million they have to spend. And they have 12 draft picks, including like 2 first rounders, I think 5 top 100 picks. The Raiders are going to be spenders. It's going to affect us in other areas, but they are at least a dark horse to potentially try to get him back. He's from, he played on the Raiders. The other team that I think immediately presents a threat to the Giants here is the Arizona Cardinals. They need a right tackle. They're drafting 3rd overall. They're rebuilding a whole new team. They're going to get a new quarterback. One of the strongest things you can do right away is just kind of solidify your O-line, and see where you can go. So I wouldn't be surprised if the Cardinals are making a push. But at the end of the day, Eluemunor, after he moved from England to the United States, lived in New Jersey before he went off to Lackawanna Community College in Scranton and then off to A&M. I'm not sure, but I believe his dad might still live in the New Jersey area. He seems to love it here. He has a family. He obviously loves being a Giant. I think it's going to, for the Giants not to be able to retain him, kind of means to me that they're just not offering him the money that's in the ballpark of what other teams are offering. And at this point, I'd be really disappointed if that's what it is, unless it's some obscene number, right? Like we don't know, but from what, like you said, what Jeremiah said out there, I think the obscene number seems less likely. I'm going to guess he's in the 18 to 20 ballpark per year. 3. So my guess on him right here, we can make our predictions. My guess is he's signing for 3 years, $57 million, so about 19 per year, and that he's going to get somewhere in the territory of about 30 million guaranteed. That's what I think he's getting from and I think he's going to stay with the Giants.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be around 18 a year. So with 3 years, 54. I think that I think Jermaine obviously wanted to be up in the 20s. I have no doubt about that. I think the market, I think the Giants probably want to be down, 15, 14. And I think, the market did not push Jermaine up as high as he wanted. He has interest in coming back. And I think, they just can go the little extra mile to make sure it gets locked up. And I think it's going to end up around 18.
Yeah. Bottom line is I think he does stay with the Giants.
And for the record, I think it'd be a little higher than expected. I'd be fine with signing Jermaine for Eluemunor at $20 million. I think he's a very good right tackle. More importantly, he's a very good pass blocking right tackle.
The way I see it is if he's still negotiating with you now into the 11th hour, right before free agency, he's signaling, I want to stay. Right. He's telling you, I like it here. I want to stay. And that you're in the ballpark. At this point, just close the deal. Right. Just close the deal. Get the common ground you need to get to. Finalize this, make him your right tackle, and then you can focus on the things that we've been talking about, the interior line, the defense, everything else. So that's our prediction. I think we both say he stays. Now, who is Jermaine Eluemunor's agent, by the way?
Goedert, right?
Yeah. And who is Cor'Dale Flott's agent?
Goedert.
Yeah. So shout out DK who brought this up all week. It seems like the Giants have been in constant communication with Jermaine Eluemunor, obviously via David Mulugheta this whole time. It's hard to believe, knowing that Flott is one of the big 3 here in terms of their own free agents, that they're not discussing Flott simultaneously as they're discussing Eluemunor. So if things are going well with Eluemunor, do you feel like we should feel optimistic about the chances of retaining Flott as well, or do you think it's just unrelated?
I don't think I shouldn't say it's unrelated. I think that, like, you kept bringing that up is a very valid point, and I do think that there's negotiations going on, but I don't necessarily think it's a package deal by any means. I think that, I think if Cor'Dale Flott is within the ballpark for them, I think that's something they still might be interested in getting done. I think they're going to go somewhere else. That's just my guess. I think if they can get the right price on Cor'Dale Flott, I think that this is a pretty good cornerback free agency, and I think that they might want to make a splash here. And I think that although we've talked about that, I think Cor'Dale Flott fits fine for Denard Wilson. I also don't necessarily think he's a good fit for Denard Wilson either. I think he play fine in this scheme, but I do think that there's better fits out there.
So I want to hear what your thoughts are on the better fits, and I'll give you my thoughts on it. I think at the end of the day, we've heard a lot of, does Flott really fit this Denard Wilson scheme, which is a lot of press, and it's, there's a lot of run defense demanded out of it at the line of scrimmage. all true. But here's what I would say to that. One, if you really study Denard Wilson's film, it's not like every single corner is in press every single play. There are definitely guys who play a little bit off man. So it's not like this hard and fast rule that you have to be there. Two, Cor'Dale Flott can play press. I think that's kind of a misconception about him. He's pretty good at press. He's not great because he's not super strong, but it's
not his strength, but he plays guys tight.
Yeah, I think he's very competent in this. Three, he's 24 years old and he's an ascending coverage corner. And I think that you can't underestimate that value of a young ascending corner. You spent 4 years developing him. I know John Harbaugh wasn't here for that, but you took him at the age of 20. You slowly do. This is one of the few things the Giants got right, where they took a young guy, they took a swing, they developed him. Now he's good. It's hard to imagine a scenario where Cor'Dale Flott's game falls off at this point, right? So I think that Cor'Dale Flott is somebody they're actually going to covet, even though people don't suspect they're going to covet him. So my guess is they're going to try to keep him. I really do. I think they're going to see a really good coverage corner. I think Denard Wilson's going to look at him and say, that's a guy who's getting better and better in coverage, and he can be an asset in my defense because I don't have to continuously shade the defense over to him. He can handle his business on his side. It allows me more freedom with my safety rotations. And I think that's how he's going to look at him. What's his market? He had one good year. Otherwise didn't get to play a lot. He's not quite a strength in the run game yet, but he's good in coverage. He's 175 pounds, whatever he is. What do you think his market is? If he was just open market right now, what's your best estimate for where he's landing contract wise?
13 to 16, I would guess. I think you see a guy like Kyler Gordon who got like 13. I think that's probably on the lower end of what I'd expect. And then I think he could go up more towards that 16. He could obviously go over that too, but I think that's probably his realistic market.
Kyler Gordon has been a 4-year starter though, and I think that does matter. And he plays more than nickel. But but
he never had a season like Flott had this last year.
He had some good years. But again, he's been a reliable starter for 4 years. I think that matters, having the track record. So I wouldn't be surprised if it's in the same range. I kind of think 13 to 14 is where he's going to land. So I'm going to say 3 years, 40 million, somewhere in that range, something a little over 13 a year is where he's going to land. And I would pay him that in a heartbeat if I'm the Giants. So I think he's coming back. If that's his range, I'm going to guess that Cor'Dale Flott and Jermaine Eluemunor are both Giants by this point tomorrow.
Yeah, I would say if you can get him for under like that 15 million, I think that's probably a pretty good value for him. Not to say that you can't sign him for what's not necessarily considered a good value if you covet what he brings to your defense. I think that's going to be the interesting part is I think, again, I'm perfectly fine bringing back Cor'Dale Flott, but I understand that there might be some thoughts that other guys would be better scheme fit. Again, this isn't saying that I don't think Cor'Dale Flott can be a scheme fit. I do think that gets overblown, but I do think there's aspects of like he's but better like off ball, click and close guy. I don't think he's the best run defender. I think those things will matter to them. And we can talk about some other guys that might be out there that I could see as a better fit and who I could see they could see being better for them right now. But I think if you can get him for under that 15, I think that is probably where they might be able to get something done. I think if he's 15, 16 million, which I could see him getting if a team covets him, that this is a guy that Daniel Jeremiah said, in the same podcast that teams were interested in and that they was getting good feedback on. I think that he could be gone. So we'll see.
So where we both sit at the end of this foundational approach to gaming this out, because let's approach the episode that way, right? Let's game it out. The way I sit is I think the Giants are signing Eluemunor and Flott, letting Wan'Dale go. And where you are is you think the Giants are signing Eluemunor and letting the other two go. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I would say the door's shut on Wan'Dale. The door's not shut on Flott, but I'm going to guess that they go a different direction at corner.
All right. I mean, that's good because then we can have kind of dueling discussions about how to game this out. That's kind of what I was hoping for today.
Yeah.
Is to see how we can play this out. Because we don't want to just discuss everybody on the market, guys. We actually want to like have a dialogue where we make everybody kind of think the way we're kind of thinking about it in terms of how we would approach it if we were in John Harbaugh and Donna Ponte and Joe Shane's shoes. So why don't you start? You have those three decisions made. Where do you see us? I mean, like, let's start with what you think our needs are and how much cap space you think we're going to be able to make without too much of a problem.
Yeah, so it's interesting. We haven't done any of our restructuring yet, really. I mean, we did the pay cut for Singletary, which, that helps because, that makes it, you have a running back 3, doesn't keep them from doing anything, but puts you in a better spot for right now. So right now they don't have a ton of cap space. They might just do it as they go along here, and I think they will, and I think they should, but I also think a lot of it's just me backloading these deals. But I think restructure a guy like Brian Burns. I think restructuring the guys that you expect to be around is pretty easy. Restructuring Brian Burns, restructuring Dexter Lawrence, or extending these guys too is also an option. Andrew Thomas, another guy extension or restructure. I think you can clear up a good bit of money, like 30 million-ish for just doing those 3 guys. Then you can talk about the Paulson Adibos and Javon Hollands of the world. And if you like those guys / you just want the money, you could restructure those guys too. But you could say that they might want to take a safer approach on those guys who they're not convinced might be here long term. That might, based off of last season to what they played to what they're getting paid. So I think you can pretty easily create. And that's without cuts. So we haven't done Graham Gano yet. We did James Hudson. Runyon could be a cut candidate if you identify the right cornerback or right guard here. So I would say they can get into 30 million pretty easily.
Oh, I'm more ambitious than you are. I've done this exercise a bunch. Yeah. I see us. Okay, so I'll start by saying I'm expecting the Giants to cut John Runyon or offer him a vetmin salary like they did with Devin Singletary, which I don't think he's going to take, but it's possible. Either way, they'll free up, I think, $9 million there, and then Gano and Gillen and all these other guys. I think just from the cuts alone, you're going to be in that 20, something to 30 range. I think when you start including the obvious restructures. And I think there's 2 obvious restructures, right? And these are 2 guys. Who do you want to restructure? You want to restructure guys who are going to be here for a bit, who you think you might actually extend later, right? I mean, I think those are your perfect candidates. So there are 2 guys who are obvious restructures, and that's Brian Burns and Andrew Thomas. Both are guys who I think at this time next year, we're talking about the Giants having conversations to extend their deals, add new money onto it, whatever it may be, but redoing their deals. So I think those are obvious restructures. And I think that the obvious extension right now is, again, a star player who's pretty much out of guaranteed money, and that's Dexter Lawrence. I'm assuming all of those 3 things will happen. Okay, so I'm going to assume all 3 of those happen. I see us at minimum $70 to $80 million range, in terms of workable cap space. Well, let's just not at minimum. I think we're going to land right around minimum. Yeah, but I think around 70 to 80. I think that's where we land. And I think that that's probably where we'll be. I don't know if we're going to trade anybody. Like, obviously, you can clear up $10 million by trading Darius Slayton, and believe it or not, people may laugh at the idea, but I think I look at the wide receiver market. If Alec Pierce is going to get $27 million a year or $28 million a year, and Wan'Dale Robinson is going to push 20, you're telling me Darius Slayton can't get traded for like a 7th round pick?
Yeah,
right. And that clears $10 million right there. So I'm assuming Slayton's gone. I can't see them wanting to hold on to him. We'll see. The other guy is obviously Kayvon. I don't know if they're going to trade Kayvon. I don't think they're going to trade him unless they get back good value or a player for player, but whatever. I think we're going to be in the 70-ish range. I'll put it that way.
So again, and it's a little higher. I'm going to stick to the model on the background as you did this. And I just kind of did a conservative thing. I went ahead and restructured Burns, Thomas, and Lawrence. Those, the easier ones. And I cut Singletary because they haven't fixed it yet. It's not going to be a big difference off the cut.
$5 million. Yeah.
They should cut Graham Gano. It's weird to me that hasn't been done yet. And I cut Roy Robertson Harris. And the other 2 cuts are already there. So that puts you at about $58 million.
with the restructure. Okay, but what you did you add void years?
No, well, you don't have to necessarily do void years on these deals, though. You could just do void years when you're signing these guys.
Well, you restructured decks. You didn't extend decks.
No, yeah. I mean, I would ideally extend them long term, but
right. All right. So let's say you just extended him and you added some void years, then you're pushing 60 something, right? And I think like that's where you get to like 70 something very easily if you make one trade.
To be fair, you don't even have to do that stuff though, because when you're signing these guys, you could just do it at the front end. Like,
well, that's your own players. That's the other thing.
Guys you're getting, yeah.
That's the other part of this. Like everybody assumes that like the number we have, like everybody's AAV has to add up to that number. No, that's not what's going to happen. Like they're going to push these contracts. Like almost, I don't think any of these contracts are going to be lined up where the heavy cap hit is year one. They're getting shoved. So again, I'm pretty confident that we're going to have the point is we're going to have plenty of room to work with here. So for those who got here late, one, thank you for being here. We love you guys. We're pushing a lot of viewers and we appreciate it. Please hit the like button. If you get a chance on YouTube, hit the like button and subscribe. If you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe. To answer the question that many of you were asking, Monte was acting up and he wouldn't listen. So I had to tell him twice and I hate to do it. I'm sorry that I did that to him, but but that's why he looks the way he does. Anyway, so all right. So I think we're gonna have plenty of room to work with. Go ahead and tell me what you're doing with that money. You don't have Cor'Dale Flott. Who are you paying at corner? Forget about corner. What are you doing now with that money? You just have Jermaine Eluemunor re-signed.
So we just have Jermaine Eluemunor. So one name that I was going to bring up at corner that's gotten thrown around a good bit yet, and I do feel like kind of fits into what I feel like John Harbaugh is doing here and just wants to get good veterans in here, is I keep an eye on Jamal Dean. If they don't, Jamal Dean is a guy who comes from the Todd Bowles defensive system. That's where Jannard Wilson came from. He originally was with Todd Bowles. And he's just been a consistently good cornerback throughout his entire career. I could see them looking at him and saying, hey, like this guy can give me two more good years. And then we could draft his replacement and, start competing today. And, I'd rather put my money here because I think he's a better fit and the money's better. And I'm not necessarily saying that that's the road I would go down. I prefer the homegrown talent in Cor'Dale Flott, but he's not a homegrown talent to John Harbaugh and Jannard Wilson. He is, there's no difference to them. It's who they think is the better fit.
Yeah. Jamal Dean's he really is one of the most underrated corners in the NFL because he's just consistently one of the better corners in the NFL. And it's just not talked about enough. But he's been doing this
ranked 5th by PFF this season, and he's 29, 28.
Yeah, he'll be 30. He'll be 30 to start this season. I think he'll be 30 in October or something. He turns 30. So he's not like he's completely over the hill, but he's pushing that age where you got to start wondering, are corners going to begin to slow down just a little bit? Remember, that is a position where your speed matters.
Yeah. And quarterbacks terrify me. Any second contract quarterback just terrifies me.
Right. This is where scheme fit does matter, though, right? Like, is Jamal Dean, if that's the Giants' target, and we've heard, some rumors that they might be interested in Jamal Dean, are they scared by Jamal Dean, knowing that this is a system where they can just put him in a press match kind of system where he doesn't necessarily have to run alone constantly with guys? So I wonder if the system that Jannard Wilson runs gives them more comfort in paying a quality veteran cornerback like Jamal Dean, because he's going to get paid, dude. Like contending teams are going to want Jamal Dean. And I think Dan Popper on his Athletic article projected him at 3 years, $54 million, so $18 million a year. And I don't think that's crazy. I don't know if he's going to make that much, but I don't see why not either. Today we saw Tremaine Edmonds get $31 million a year from the Rams on an extension, and Jamal Dean isn't a 25-year-old, but all of a sudden, like, the number starts looking like it's going to get higher, right?
Yeah.
So. So are you comfortable giving Jamal Dean 3 years, $54 million?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the guaranteed money and whatnot. I think that's what it comes down. I think for what he's playing at, I'd have no issue doing it. But you got to hedge his age a little bit, and that's good. That's going to be part of this too. We will see what these guys get paid. We've talked about it. People tend to pay for what a player could be instead of the player they are today when they're a little bit younger. And I think you're paying for what he could be the next couple years, which is he's getting older, and but he's been a good player. So I don't necessarily know. I could see it coming a little bit lower in 18, but it depends on the guaranteed money. That's going to be the big thing.
All right. How about 16 million? Do you think he could be 3 years, 48 million?
Yeah, I can see it in there. And 18 might be the number, and might just be like arguing over the guaranteed stuff, because that's
so let me compare you to the benchmark then. You're trying to pay a guy for what he will be, right? And we just said that corners, they do tend to slow down. Everybody slows down when they hit 30.
Yeah.
That's nature. And when a corner slows down, it does affect their game. So who do you feel better paying 3 years, 48? Would you feel better paying 3 years and $48 million to Jamal Dean, or 3 years and $40 million to 24-year-old Cor'Dale Flott right now?
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't feel good about the third year. I'd have to see the guaranteed money. I do feel better that Jamal Dean is a proven player throughout his entire career, and he's played well to this age. And I know he's not a fluke. I can't say that about Cor'Dale Flott. I can't say Cor'Dale Flott's going to necessarily be a good fit in this system. I know Jamal Dean has played in a similar system, and I know Jamal Dean has been a good player for a long time in this league. So I would bet over the next 2 years, third year, but I think I would want to be able to get out from there. I would bet on Jamal Dean as far as just next 2 years, who I think is be a better football player.
I'm willing to bet this is the conversation happening in the Giants building right now, because I'm sure they love Jamal Dean and the player he is, and they like Cor'Dale Flott, and I have a feeling they love what he could be. And the question is, where do you put your money? On the proven commodity who's approaching 30, or on the ascending player who's 25 or 24, whatever he is?
And Flott, you might be able to start talking about doing a fourth year, and you can't really talk about that with Jamal Dean. You're like third year is already kind of pushing it.
Right. If I'm Flott, I'm not taking a fourth year. I want to hit free agency again at 27, 28, like I'm Flott. Depending on the guaranteed money, obviously.
Yeah, I get that, but I'm also like, these dudes just drop off. They fucking look at how fast, how young Odori Jackson was, and how worthless he was by the time he got there.
Right. Let's talk about some other corners while we can. And thank you guys for the super chats. We're going to get to them. We're just going to try to keep pushing. So a couple of other guys worth mentioning. Low end guy. Let's say you decide not paying Flott, I want to save money here. I want a system guy. Well, Justin Penning brought up a system guy for the Ravens, and who's worked with both the Ravens as well as with Denard Wilson in Tennessee, who might be somebody under the radar, but really shouldn't be. And that's another 30-year-old player, Chidobe Awuzie. He was a rotational guy for the Ravens last year, but really, I mean, you look at his numbers, and he's very similar to Flott, and he's been good in terms of, just overall coverage grades and things like that. He is a little bit more physical, a little bigger than Flott. Obviously understands the defense. This might be a situation where if you don't get the preferred guy, you bring in the veteran that knows your system, that can help the other guys. What does it do? What is he going to cost? A few $1 million, at his age, 5 million, something like that. So what do you feel about, like, I can't get Cor'Dale Flott, I'm going to go ahead and sign the veteran who knows my system, and we'll just see how the draft goes. How do you feel about that approach?
I wouldn't feel great about Awuzie being planned to be my starter, but maybe you can look into making a trade. Maybe you can look into the draft and things like that. And maybe you do with numbers, man. Maybe you do bring in a couple guys, and you get this thing done through a few good players.
Yeah. There's two more names I want to mention. I want to go to the other positions because we have a lot to go through. But one, just the connection with Delicio, what is he? Is he our defensive pass game coordinator officially? I forgot what his role is. And one of the better free agents out there is Jalen Watson. Watson's 27 from the Chiefs. Really, the dude was a 7th round pick, and they have a great coach out there in Kansas City who turns all these corners into great players. And then they flip them and let somebody else pay them, and they collect the assets. That seems to be their theme. But Watson is a free agent. Now that they are not paying McDuffie, I suspect that the Chiefs will try to bring back Watson.
Yeah.
But in the event they don't, his expected value is 4 years, $73 million. He's a little bit more of the prototypical boundary corner, 6'3", 197, 6'2", 197. Have you given thought to Watson as a possible replacement here?
Yeah, I mean, that's a guy we talked about a little bit in our connection episode for the free agency. You could also talk about, Joshua Williams, another guy there. This is, that's Diosa was, he was there. He was with the Chiefs. So I think that is a natural fit. And I do think those are guys who they also might look at. And that's where I'm saying, like, I think that there's going to be some interest in Flott, but I think there's a few good corners in this free agency who have connections to this team who they're also going to be very open to.
Yep. One more name I want to mention before we go to other positions, and it's a guy that's gotten mentioned a little with the Giants, but not much. But from a schematic standpoint, might be a very good fit, and that's Eric Stokes. If you guys remember, came out of Georgia, 6 feet tall, 194 pounds, a physical press corner. Not the best turn and run guy, very good at the line of scrimmage, but really has found his niche in playing with Patrick Graham, actually, after his time in Green Bay. And he plays in a very similar kind of a pattern match system. He can play, he's very good at press, and he's good at like functioning in this match zone system, which is exactly what Denard Wilson supposedly wants to run. Eric Stokes is, he's only 27. His projected value is less than the other guys because he doesn't have the track record, but 2 years, $20 million. What do you think about Stokes?
Stokes is another interesting one. Similar to Flott, he's really only has one year to go off. He didn't have as good of a year as Flott, but this is a guy who had a pretty solid year. He forced a 12% incompletion percentage. And he was that what it was, wherever it was, forced incompletion percentage. And he was former first or second round pick. He was an early pick.
I think he was a first round pick.
Yeah, I think it ended first round. Very good athlete. I can see this going one of two ways though, Eric Stokes. I can either see people looking at who he was as a draft pick, seeing it start to finally come together and say, I'm going to pay this guy because I think he's like the next big thing, and him getting overpaid, even though not necessarily be there. I could also see this being a situation where, hey, this is finally starting to come together. I see this. I think I can take him to the next level, and you get him for a little bit cheaper. And all of a sudden you look back on it, it's like that was a great signing, and you keep him for a couple of years and you move on. And that's what good teams do. They can identify these guys right before they break out, develop them, and then, wish them the best and have them cheap for a couple of years.
Yeah. I mean, I only bring him in there's no connection. It's just a system match, So, and I think he's a little cheaper. He's young, someone to look at, but all good options. My preference and my prediction is still Cor'Dale Flott's a Giant. Yours is we're going down this pathway. So that's corner. Is there anybody else want to talk about corner before we jump to the next group here?
Let's see. No, I mean, I'll just go back to our free agency connection episode. We don't talk about it too much, but the other ones I had were Roger McCreary had the connection to Denard Wilson from Tennessee, but he's very similar to I'm blanking, Andrew Phillips. So I don't necessarily know if that's a path they're going to go down, but he's a solid player. Darius Slay is a guy he has a connection to, but he's an older guy. I don't necessarily see that. But just names worth mentioning.
All right. Let's go to the next most important position. Actually, probably the most important position group that we don't have solved internally, and that's interior offensive line. And I think this is worth discussing. So this is a very simple, algorithmic approach. If Tyler Linderbaum, then this. If not Tyler Linderbaum, then that. And at this point, I think it's safe to say that they're probably falling out of the Tyler Linderbaum, sweepstakes at this point, right? So, and I think Linderbaum is likely going to the Raiders. He's headed out, is my guess, and he's going to get I think he's going to get a pretty monstrous contract from them, approaching tackle money. I don't think the Giants are going to be playing for that. So let's assume for our discussion's sake, Linderbaum's not here. And let's just assume for the sake of argument that they have $30-ish million that they're willing to spend in AAV, not cap dollars, but AAV on that position. right now in free agency. You're not getting Linderbaum. You're keeping John Michael Schmitz for the time being. What are we doing at the guard position?
There's some names out there, man. This is a position that we have a lot of connections to. One that we don't have connection to, but's been brought up a couple times now, which I think a lot of people will be interested in, is Elijah Vera-Tucker. I know that Connor Hughes brought him up right about when we got on. He was one of the names mentioned. He mentioned him along with Jamal Dean and a couple others. But he's been mentioned a few times. That's an interesting one. I think a similar type guy, not quite as good when he's healthy, but a guy who's injured and has been very good when he's healthy, is a guy like Tevin Jenkins. We talked about him in our connection episode where Tevin Jenkins played for Matt Nagy. He got drafted by Matt Nagy. He went over and played under Bloomgren in Cleveland. Actually, they benched Wyatt Teller, I believe, for him. So that might be something to consider when we talk about Wyatt Teller. I don't know who made that decision, if that was a Kevin Stefanski decision or a Bloomgren decision or whatever it was. But I think that's a guy to keep an eye on. I think that's a good young upcoming player. The injury's been a worry, but if you're looking at a guy like Elijah Vera-Tucker, I don't know, maybe you won't take a shot on a guy like that. But yeah, I mean, I mentioned Wyatt Teller. Bettino doesn't retire. And there's some other names. What do you got?
So the way I look at this is I think injuries aside, the best guard on the market is Elijah Vera-Tucker. And I think hands down, the most talented guard on the market is Elijah Vera-Tucker. Because of injuries, he is not going to command the contract he would have. Let's be real. If Elijah Vera-Tucker was not injured, the Jets would have paid him. But let's just say he hit the market. He would be pushing $20-something million a year. That's how good he is, right?
Yeah, he wouldn't hit the market.
Right. But if he did, it would be like 20-something million. He'd be in that Robert Hunt, kind of number. Like, he'd be pushing a lot of money. So I think that's your best buy is Elijah Vera-Tucker. I think the rumors are, I saw Popper write something like 2 million, 3 million. I'm like, that's not going to happen. I think we had estimated like 8 to 10 million. He probably is a little above that, and he might get more than 1 year, right? He might get a little bit more than 1 year guaranteed. So I'm thinking he's going to land somewhere in like that 12 to 14 million a year range for a 1 year deal, maybe a 2 year deal. And I would personally take the risk on it simply because I have a built-in hedge for Elijah Vera-Tucker here in New York. The issue with Elijah Vera-Tucker is the injury risk. What if you could have a handicap that protects you against that risk that's cheap and reliable? Like Greg Van Roten, who has been our starting right guard for 2 years, is now, I think, 37 years old or 36 years old. I think he still lives in Long Island. He likes it out here. He's comfortable, especially if we sign Jermaine Eluemunor, who's been his running mate for how many years now.
Yeah.
I would feel very comfortable saying, instead of giving all that money to one guy, I'd be very comfortable taking the upside swing on Elijah Vera-Tucker and signing Jermaine Eluemunor for a combined $15 to $16 million, the two of them, to handle the right guard spot. How do you feel about that plan?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an interesting plan because, if we're going to assume that Eluemunor or that Linderbaum doesn't get done, maybe it will, but doesn't seem that way. This is a way that you can kind of bet on upside that you're getting from a guy like Linderbaum. Like, the hope with Linderbaum is, yes, you're overpaying a little bit, but you're getting an 8-year starter onto this team. He's going to be an anchor. He's a top 5 player at his position, all that type of stuff. If Elijah Vera-Tucker hits and he's healthy, you can figure it out. That's what you're getting at Elijah Vera-Tucker, and now he's under your control. You can control extending him and all that type of stuff. And he's here now. And that's when we're looking at 5 years from now, instead of like, I look back to a few years ago where it's like, we missed out on, Robert Hunt, but hey, we got all these guys, and it worked out with Jermaine Eluemunor, but now it's like Runyon was nothing. Sometimes doing the free agency by numbers, sometimes you just kind of wish you got the big guy in the end. You're like, that guy's still fucking good. Right. The right bet here though is a guy like Vera-Tucker, where you can get some of that upside.
Yeah, I'm all in on that. Would be my plan A. Just to be clear, my plan A would be get Vera-Tucker here, assuming his range is in that 12 to 14-ish range per year. Give him a 1 or 2 year deal. I'm comfortable with 2 with him. because you might be you're buying risk, but you might be buying value also. It's a bit of a gamble, but I'm willing to make that gamble knowing I have GVR under contract, and I would get them both signed at the same time. Like I would say, here, GVR, you're the veteran in this room. You're a leader. I think GVR would be more than comfortable being kind of our swing interior lineman and being a leader for these guys and being paid to maybe not get his ass kicked every Sunday and have to take a beating at his age, So I think that's the perfect plan A for me. Plan B would be getting a guy like Teller or a guy like David Edwards, right? That's a guy you've mentioned a lot, the Bills guard who's worth talking about. The Bills have one of the better guards out there. Maybe other than AVT, maybe the best guard, right? Arguably. Now, the Bills made a decision. They just extended Connor McGovern for about $13 million a year to keep their center. And you have to wonder if that means that they're going to be a little less able to pay Edwards before he hits the market. I think he is going to hit the market, which means he's 50-50 to go back versus, go elsewhere. What are you comfortable giving David Edwards if that was your primary target?
I'd be okay going up around like 15, 16 million for David Edwards. I think he's a very, very good guard. I think that you would be able to bring in you'd comfortably have like a top 15 guard in the league. I think that's being somewhat conservative. He's still, he's 29 there. Yeah. He's about to turn 29. He's 28 still. But I understand from the Bills aspect as well, where, the Bills need to save some money, and they probably trust the idea that, hey, like we found these guys that we let go and we're good at, finding these guys and developing them. So instead of re-signing David Edwards, let's go find the next David Edwards, because they've been able to do that. The Giants haven't. The Giants have been bad at doing that. Basically, most of the offensive linemen they bring in underperform. So I do think shopping at the top of the market is something I think they should do at the O-line position. I think is make sure that you have these guys protect Jackson Dart. I think you bring in David Edwards and you don't worry about it. But I think there's going to be a lot of teams that are going to be interested in David Edwards. So we'll see what he gets.
Yeah, it was a curious decision by the Bills. I don't want to get too much into it, but they drafted Cedric Van Pran a couple of years ago, and I thought they were just grooming him to take over. But at the same time, new coach, your offensive coordinator is now your head coach, and maybe they just didn't want the turnover at a critical spot like center, and they said we just don't want to deal with it. Let's just keep McGovern, and we'll figure out a guard. But either way, I do think he's going to be a highly coveted guard. He's expected to make in that 16, 17 million a year range. I wouldn't be shocked if he pushes close to 20. The way free agency goes when you're like the guy, he's the right age, right? He's 28. He's a veteran at 28. He's got tremendous tape on him already. He's, like you said, a top 10, top 15 type guard at any given time. Mm-hmm. These guys get paid. So I'm okay with paying him, but I wouldn't be surprised if he's out there pushing 18 to 20 a year. So, it's something to monitor. I don't know if they're in that sweepstakes, but he's somebody to look out for. The other one is Isaac Seumalo. Yes. And I wanted him a few years ago when he left the Eagles and went to the Steelers for a very reasonable deal. I think he signed for like $8 million a year or something like that. And got trained up by Jeff Stoutland, but continued to be good. And he's still only, I think, 32 years old, something like that. So he's not that old. I think Seumalo's looking at what? 14 million, 15 million a year, something like that, in that range, maybe even a little less based on age. Mm-hmm. How do you feel about him?
I think he'd be a great signing. I think there's so many. That's like one of the strengths, if not the strength of free agency, I think, is this interior offensive line. And Isaac Seumalo, I mean, there's no weakness really to his game. You can say that he's not, the top of the line guard in this league. You could argue he is, but he's a good run blocker. He's a good pass protector. I don't necessarily have the connection to draw here. Maybe there is one. But he's
connection to what?
To anybody in the Giants coaching staff.
There's not.
But I think he ultimately is a very good player, and I think that I'd be thrilled to bring him in. I'm curious how much he gets as well.
The connection is his play style. He's physical, he's aggressive, and he's a good move pull blocker. So when you think about the kind of offense that you would expect, let's assume Greg Roman is kind of designing the run game, and Bloomgren runs something akin to what he did at Stanford. You're going to run a lot of heavy personnel. You're going to have big guys moving around, pull blockers. So Ciamalo fits it to a T. So I think that's the connection, just like Stokes fits the defense. So I'd be very comfortable giving him, the projection is 2 years, $28 million from The Athletic. It's probably about right. He's 32. I would give him a 3-year deal and guarantee a little bit more money to lock him up personally. I think he would be my number 2 target behind paying AVT and JVR.
I'll put it this way. It was again where I feel good about this. Any of these guys kind of get signed in the first hour or so, it's going to take a while until I start freaking out, until I'm like, we still don't have one of these guys, because it's fine. There's plenty of guys left.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Anybody else want to talk about on the interior, or should we move to the next position group?
Let me see. I'll just look at my connections real quick. Oh, there's a couple guys here. Kevin Zeitler would be a name, I think. He has connection to the Giants, has a connection to Harbaugh. I think that you could argue he's over the last 3 years, he's been the best guard of all these guys. He's older, but can you get 1-2 years out of him and continue to develop guys? That could be a really good cheap option. I'm not interested in Zion Johnson. He has a Greg Roman connection. He has the Harbaugh to Harbaugh connection. I think he's going to get paid for what he could be instead of what he is today, and I'm just not interested in getting.
Put a number on it, because he's someone that we should be aware of.
I think he's going to get north of 10 million. I think he's going to get probably north of. I think he might get north of 12, but I think he's so far he's been like a $5-6 million player.
Yeah, I agree. I think he might get 15 plus, 15, 16.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise
status. And he did just enough at the end. If you watch the Chargers game, even though their offensive line was awful, he did just enough towards the end of the season where he started showing who he was back at Boston College in his senior year, that he was. It looked like he was beginning to put it together. Where sometimes that's all it takes, right? When you were that first round pedigree, I remember him putting up like 35 reps on the bench. He was like the darling of that whole Senior Bowl pre-draft process season. There's a bunch of teams that fell in love with a guy. If they just saw a glimpse of that guy that they fell in love with that they didn't get in the draft, somebody's got to pay him. So I kind of don't want it to be us, but it's possible. I will mention that algorithmically, the way I'm looking at this, Monte, is my primary objective is try to get AVT and GVR, and then we'll figure out left guard. If you cannot get AVT and GVR, I would actually flip completely and quickly to try to get Isaac Ciamalo as my left guard. And I would then go after Kevin Zeitler, who's only played right guard in the NFL, right? Because I think you can get him for cheaper because he's older and he's a sturdy presence. And I would still bring back GVR if you could, but I would say I would get Zeitler in here. And so I think like Zeitler plus Ciamalo is probably costing you about 20 million, something like that together. Plus throw in GVR a few million. AVT plus GVR is probably costing you in the territory of like 16, 17 million, something like that, right? 15, 16, 17 million. So that's how I'm looking at this. I don't know which guard position they're going to fill right away, but I think that's the kind of investment I'm looking at. Those are the ways I'm hoping to land. I hope they land one of those two pathways.
Yeah. I guess the one other guy I want to talk about real quick before we move on, I mentioned him, but just get your thoughts on him. What do you think about bringing a guy like Tevin Jenkins?
I would not be opposed to it. We were talking about this before the show. Jenkins was, like you said, arguably the best player on that Cleveland team this past year. Similar to AVT, right? Very talented, very good when he's on the field. A lot of injury risks. But
he's an ass kicker, like what they're looking for.
He's everything they want prototypically. The question is his health. So one, you got to make sure he's actually healthy to start the season. Assuming he is, same thing. You got to hedge him. You sign him and you got to hedge him with another guard, whether it's GVR or somebody else. It's the same way I look at AVT.
He could be like the cheaper version of AVT.
Is he going to be cheaper, you think?
I don't know. I misremembered when we were talking about this earlier. I thought he signed more. He only signed for $3 million with the Browns.
Yeah, that's fair. But I mean, again, like how many? Let me see. How much did he play this year? I mean, he put up he didn't have a bunch. He had 324 snaps.
And he got hurt again.
Yeah. And, this guy's never hit 1,000 snaps. Like, look, his snap count is concerning, right? He was drafted in 21 by the Bears, obviously when Matt Nagy was there, right? 160 snaps. This is Matt Nagy's last season, by the way. 160 snaps, then 576, 731, 738, 324. He never finishes a season. And just to give you perspective, that's, full season, you're putting up like 1,000 snaps, You're only closer to 1,000. He never gets to 1,000. That means he's missing approximately a third of the season every year. And I think you have to prepare for that. So I'm okay with signing him, but you got to prepare for him to miss 5-6 games. That's pretty standard for him.
Yep. All right. Do you want to do a few super chats before we move on to the next?
Yeah, please. Let's get through them, and let's thank you for the people who are doing this.
Yeah, thank you everybody. Super chats. Let's start with our guy Anthony. He asked us, what is a sneaky free agent signing you guys think the Giants will do tomorrow/this week? Does anyone come to mind for you?
I've constantly brought up the same name, and we'll get to it with linebackers, but I think Kaden Elliss is a guy not being discussed in connection with the Giants. And I'm just connecting dots in terms of defensive play style. I think he fits this defense perfectly and what they're looking for. So that's my guy.
That's a good one. He's a good player. I think the guy to keep an eye on is Darnell Mooney was officially cut by the Falcons. He has a connection to Matt Nagy back in Chicago, and it seems like that Wan'Dale Robinson is leaving, and there's not a lot of big names here in free agency at the wide receiver. It'll be interesting if they look at some of these big names, and we can talk about it when we get there. But I could see them taking, saying, hey, we have Malik Nabers, we have our one, but we don't know when he's going to be ready. So let's take a little bit more of that Kansas City Chiefs approach, win by numbers, get a lot of competent guys, and then we'll have our one once he's ready, but we have the guys to go till then.
I've used the term wide receiver by committee, and people got nauseous when I said it, but I think that's the Kansas City model, right? And here's the thing. Kansas City's model was based on everybody around Travis Kelce. Kelce was the constant, and everybody else was like a moving part. And obviously when they had Tyreek Hill, they had him, but they won 2 Super Bowls after he left, so that I don't think that was the key. The key was having like a bunch of targets. So I think that they're going to assume Nabers is going to be healthy at some point, and they're just going to go wide receiver by committee until they can find a natural spot to get a higher end wide receiver. I don't think they're forcing it.
And look, at the end of the day, like, you're getting Malik Nabers back, and you're getting, even if you have 80% of Malik Nabers, you have a true wide receiver one in this league. So I do think that having Malik Nabers on this team gives them a place to fall back on with that. There's not going to be the actual, you don't have Patrick Mahomes. You can't necessarily do what the Kansas City Chiefs do, but you also have Malik Nabers.
All right, let's go through the rest of the super chats. And then we'll move to the next
let's see. There's our boy Rob. Cheers, boys, and here's to hopefully a great free agency in 2026 season.
Thank you, Rob. Big spender, Rob. I appreciate
20
it.
$20. Appreciate you, Rob.
Won that money in the casinos. I know it. All right.
A man of many words. D-Kit said, "Thank you, D-Kit."
Thank you, D-Kit. I know what that means. I speak his language. That means I'll call you later. I'll let you know when I need a favor. You got it.
Or he finally figured out how to get super chat to work and then got confused.
His daughter probably hit him in the head again with something. He told me today that his I think she a 3-year-old or a 2-year-old, like, aimed for his head with something and hit him square on his half bald head, and he was upset about it. And I was like, well, you should think about the positive, which is that you're training her to be like a great pitcher or a quarterback. She's got good aim.
There you go.
Congratulations, that his granddaughter. Excuse me. Yeah. All right. Any more?
Yep. Our boy Chris.
He
said, "I have a bone to pick with Sal. He got my wife hooked on Celsius, the unofficial drink of He's a Giant Pod. If you want to put the plug here, Sal, for our unofficial sponsor."
I feel dirty constantly promoting these bastards because they refuse to sponsor us despite our extremely subtle timeline call outs to them to make sure they sponsor us. Nevertheless, I do enjoy a Celsius sparkling grape during our episodes of He's a Giant Pod. It's a refreshing drink. It's only got, I don't know, 6 bazillion grams of caffeine or something. I don't know how much it is. It's a lot, but it's tasty. I enjoy it. If you want to stay up at night for no reason whatsoever, drink a Celsius. Thank you, Chris.
If you don't start sponsoring us, I'm going to get Diet Coke involved. So
there's some other one that we're supposed to go to and try. If they don't, I have to get through my box first. I canceled my Amazon subscription to it. So if they don't sponsor, I think I'm down to like 20. If we get through another 20 episodes or so, and we don't get sponsorship, then we're moving on to something.
We're moving on. And then one last quick one for our guy, just a heart from our guy, KSIXI. Our guy, we got to get you back on for a big board episode like we do every year.
Big board's going to be coming up soon. All right. Shall we move on to the next position group? So we did interior O-line. We've done corners. Let's go to the next big group, which is linebacker, Monte. We need a linebacker. We don't have linebackers. We cut Bobby Okereke, rightfully so. Right now, the only linebacker on our team, the only 2 linebackers, I believe, are Darius Muasau and Chris Board. Chris Board may stick because he's a special teams ace, and he was just hurt this past year, and he's a Harbaugh guy. I have a feeling he's going to stick. I don't know if he's going to stick on his cap value. I wouldn't be surprised if they gave him a pay cut, but I think he'll stick. Muasau was a pick specifically for Michael Gabriel, played with him at UCLA. I think he's probably going to get cut at some point, maybe not right away, but in camp. I can't see him winning out jobs against other people, but we need linebackers. This is probably a high priority area to spend. I know they're digging around, trying to find somebody. Let's talk about it. What are we doing at linebacker?
I think this is a really interesting one because this is where all the rumors have been. Before the NFL insiders took out Ricky was telling us that there was a trade supposedly out there for a linebacker. I know our boy Anthony was talking about Zaire Alexander potentially being a guy that we were trying to get. Obviously that hasn't worked out. It sounds like Ricky was saying that it didn't. It fell apart. So, but it's clear that linebacker is something that they're going after, something that they want. I'm curious with a guy who got cut in Tremaine Edmonds. That's a guy who the Giants tried to go after a few years ago. It's a guy that Joe Shane drafted in his first ever draft as an assistant GM. Still is pretty young and is maybe not the pass coverage guy he used to be, but still a very good run defender in this league. There's some other names we can talk about, but I think that's an interesting one. I'm curious if they're still open to trying to get a trade out there. There were some rumors that they reached out to Lions about Jack Campbell, so it's something that they clearly value.
I have an inkling as to who they might have tried to trade for. I'm not going to share it here, but okay. I think it's just connecting dots, Mm-hmm. And I'm going to say I suspect that they would be looking for let's say there was a team that wanted to keep a linebacker that was hitting free agency. Mm-hmm. And they wanted to move money around to get that guy. Would they trade somebody they already have? I think, well, who would trade a starting linebacker? That's the first question, right? Yeah. And it might be a team that has a linebacker they want to keep and that's hitting free agency, and they want to reassert those funds, or they have a young linebacker they just drafted that's taken over. But there's not a lot of linebackers in the NFL, mm-hmm. that are just drafted waiting for a job. Usually when they're drafted and they're good, they play. So I don't know, I think you can kind of figure it out from there, like what teams have 3 or 4 linebackers and who might be on the trading block. From that point forward, what are they looking for? It does seem like they want a veteran, mm-hmm. And when I don't mean like a 24-year-old veteran. I think they want like a guy closer to 30. A 28 to 30-year-old veteran is, I think, optimal for them to be a Mike linebacker. I think they want a sturdy, run-stopping, field general type linebacker out there. I really believe that's what they covet. And I'm sure they're going to look at this in 2 different ways, where they can get a Mike who's, even if he's not as old as like 28, 30, who's just like a run stuffing, ace, or they can get a guy who's a little bit older who can help call the defense and be a veteran out there. I think that's their priority. I really believe that. And I think they're going to err on age here. 1, because it helps implement the defense. 2, because as everybody should know by now, this linebacker draft class is extraordinarily strong.
Yeah.
And I think it makes sense to pair a veteran linebacker who's a little bit older with a guy you draft in the top 100 picks, and that's how I'm looking at this. So that's my perspective on how they're going to approach this. I think they want a Mike. I don't think it has to be a Mike. I think it has to be a veteran, though. Somebody who's about 28, 30 years old, a lot of experience, who can help really, if not hold the green dot, somebody who can pretty much be that, in terms of leading the defense.
Yeah. And Anthony, correct me. You're correct. Zaire Franklin Alexander. So my bad on that one. But yeah, it's a really interesting offseason to need a linebacker, because this is probably one of the most loaded mix between free agency and the draft, because there are some names out here in both spots. I mean, I was actually kind of just looking at this list of free agency, and it's kind of amazing how many of these top guys actually shook loose to free agency. We talked about a guy like Tyler Linderbaum, a guy like Trey Franklin, and then a guy like Jamal Dean. But a guy here that relates to the guy like Devin Lloyd, only 27 years old. He's one of the best linebackers in this league. I'm curious if they would be interested in him. He's a fantastic football player. Devin Bush is a guy who, we talked about, played for his brother at Michigan. He had a very good year. I'm not a big Kobe Dean fan, but that is a big name. Leo Chanel is a big name. You got some older guys you mentioned. It's Bobby Wagner, Demario Davis, Matt Milano, who was the other one I was thinking? Levante David. And there's so many guys, man. We mentioned Tremaine Edmonds. You mentioned Kaden Elliss earlier. I think Alexander Zaloni's name's been thrown around. So I think that they're gonna look around here in free agency, but I think that Quay Walker, another name. He's a little bit controversial, but he's gonna be an interesting one. So I agree with you. I think that they might go a pair through both, but this should be an interesting one. If they're aggressive here, there's names to go after.
Yeah, I mean, you missed a couple. So today the news broke that, I don't know if you saw it, that the Broncos actually re-signed Justin Strnad to a 3-year contract. It was a guy I had pegged as somebody I would want the Giants to go after. He played like the linebacker 2/3 role over there in Denver. I think they locked him up thinking he would slide into more of a starting role. They had two guys hitting the free agency market, and the other one being Alex Singleton, who's 32. He's older. I thought they were going to I thought they were going to keep Singleton. It looks like they've chosen Strnad, and that means Singleton's hitting the market. I never really thought Singleton would be a true like open free agent, but it seems like he's out there. Add him to the list of guys who fit the mold, right? 32 years old, solid veteran, excellent run stopping linebacker, not an ace in coverage anymore. I don't think he has that athleticism anymore, but he's a really good run stuffing linebacker. And I think the kind of veteran that can help bring another young linebacker along. So again, I think add him to the list. I'm a big Kaden Elliss guy. Everybody by now who talks to me know this. Kaden Elliss, a guy who's just under the radar, solid player, for years and years. He's been with the Falcons for 3 years now. He's good at everything. He's a good run defender. He actually does have sideline to sideline range. He's very good in zone coverage. He does the whole thing, and he's a pretty sound tackler. He does have like about an 11% missed tackle rate, which is a little bit on the high side for guys who are playing linebacker, but it's not. When you watch him on tape, his technique is sound. He's not getting beat. He's not taking terrible angles. Like, he's just a solid player. And I feel like that's the kind of exact veteran I would like to get. I don't think he'll cost much, probably 10 to 12 million a year, in that range. It's not overwhelming. I think Singleton will be in the same range. So I think those are the guys I'd go after, guys like Singleton, Ellis. I don't know if they're going to go shopping for a Quay Walker, but would they consider a guy like Demario Davis, who's like 48 years old, but he's good every single year for like a 1-year deal, right? Like, I think these are the kind of guys you have to get, because again, not that you want to draft for need, but the draft is loaded with good young linebackers. I really feel like the best thing you can do is sign one of these solid veterans and pair them with somebody you draft.
And if you miss out, you still have the guy for the year. And, unfortunately, you'd have to go after next year, but you're not going to be without a good player.
Yeah. And it should be worth mentioning that Micah McFadden is I think he's being signed by the Giants.
I agree.
I think his injury week 1 really put a damper on his ability to showcase himself for the league. He's coming back. Dan Duggan pointed out that he's a 4-year veteran essentially, and that he's eligible for this exemption where the Giants can basically pay him up to $2.8 million, but he only counts for 1.4 against the cap, essentially doubling his value to the team. I don't know any other team that's going to come over the top and give him $3 million. You know, I think that there's a good chance he sticks with the Giants.
So pick one of these guys, one of these free agents you think the Giants will get, and what do you think we're paying them?
I'm going to stick with my surprise signing. I'm going to say Kaden Elliss. I think they're going to give him I think they'll give him a 2-year deal worth $22 million.
Okay. I'm gonna go with the more obvious guy, the name that's been thrown around at nauseam almost at this point. But I think Tremaine Edmonds. I think that's a guy who they try to go after, has a connection to the front office. I think his body type and athleticism fits kind of what Harbaugh looks for. He's not even 28 yet, even though he's been in the league forever now. So I'd say they bring him in. I'm gonna go 3 for 33.
I'm going to make one more pitch and I like it, but I'm going to make one more pitch for Ellis. And you know what that is?
What?
It's a connection.
Okay.
Who is the current Giants linebacker coach?
Oh, what was his name? Or
Frank
outsider Frank Bush. Yeah, that's right.
And Frank where Bush. Was he in between 21 and 23?
Tell me.
Atlanta. There's a year of overlap. 1 year, but 1 year of overlap with Ellis. So he is their linebackers coach. You're looking for linebackers. You know, I would assume Jernard Wilson's talking to his linebacker coach with John Harbaugh and saying, who are linebackers that work for us and do this well? I'm just going out on a limb and saying, because on tape he matches what we do. The linebacker coach work with him. He probably, if he feels the same way, boom. That's it. That's my pitch. That's my final pitch for Kaden Elliss. And as soon as he signs somewhere else, I promise you I'll move on.
All right. Sounds good. Hey, I like that. We haven't had a lot of connections at linebackers, so there is one. We didn't do it for interior line, so let's do it. Pick one guy interior line that you think we're gonna get. I know we talked about all these different ways of hedging. Pick one and give me a contract.
I think we're gonna get Elijah Vera-Tucker.
Okay.
Just because he's in New York, and I think they're going to make a play for him. I'm going to say the Giants are going to offer him a 2-year deal that other teams are not willing to offer. And I'm going to say it's going to be 2 years, $27 million.
2 years, $27 million.
And I think they'll guarantee like $16 million or something like that I don't think other teams will. And I think that's how they'll get him. That's my guess.
Okay. Yeah, I like that. I mean, it's a big upside swing. It's a lot of money, but I think that would get it done. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go with the guy I mentioned. I think the step down from Elijah Vera-Tucker, but the guy who has connections to both our OC and our O-line coach. I'm going to go with Tevin Jenkins. I'm going to say they bring in Tevin Jenkins. I'm going to say they give him a 2-year, $14 million deal, $7 million a year.
Perfect. I'd be happy with either one. Both same idea, right? For both of them, but we're swinging for the fence.
And then we'll bring Van Roten for both of ours as the back.
Greg Van Roten is the perfect hedge for all these guys.
Yeah.
All right. So we did linebackers. We've done interior line and we've done corners. Let's go to the next group. The next most important group in my mind, I think you would agree, is interior D line.
Yeah. I would say that or wide receiver.
Yep. Well, let's leave wide receiver for last because it's such an intriguing space. And running back. We should probably get to running back.
Yeah, we should honestly just do weapons like we do tight ends
together. We could just bunch them. But let's do interior D line. We have a Dex. It's like saying we have a Hulk, right? We have a Dex.
Yeah.
We have 2 edge rushers. Right now we have 3 edge rushers who are really excellent as a trio. We have a guy like Chauncey Golston, who I think this regime will value, being a strong defensive end type. What we need badly. And we have a Darius Alexander who was showing signs of coming on at the end of the season, who I think you can count on being a pretty good pass rushing 3 tech. We'll see what he does in the run game. I have a lot of hope for him, but we definitely need a veteran fat guy, a run stuffing fat guy who can help take that pressure off Dex and really be somebody who can slide in and play nose when you take Dex off the field. I think that's kind of what we're looking for here, right? So would you agree that that's how they're going to look at it, or do you think they'll look at this differently?
No, I think that that's probably accurate.
So let's go through the possible names here. You want to get it started?
Sure. I would say the big name here, you're a big fan of him. You brought him up a lot. I think he's gonna get a good payday. So we'll see if we want to go there. Is John Franklin Myers. I think that's a guy to keep an eye on. I think he's gonna be highly coveted all around the league. He has some connections to this team that I mentioned previously between Denard Wilson and Frank Bush. Both have a connection to him. You can bring up Sebastian Joseph-Day, who played with Denard Wilson last year. I think that there's some guys who have been let go who are going to be interesting. I think, Jonathan Allen, I think, is an interesting name and feels like a little bit of a Harbaugh type move where he kind of brings on these guys who used to be great players in the league, but can still be reliable for you. I think another guy that falls into it, somebody that we're very familiar in, Dalvin Tomlinson. I think teaming him back up with Dex could be interesting. Giants fans have been talking about doing that forever, and he hits free agency every 2 years or so.
But I think Dalvin has become the new Leonard Floyd, in a weird way.
He's been here. Yeah. So, but he could be an interesting one. I don't think he'll be that expensive this time around. Granted, I say that every single time, and he gets fucking paid. So who knows? And then I think the really interesting one, Christian Wilkins. I think that's the interesting one. I'm curious how they fall on him. I know Dexter Lawrence is going to advocate for him. That's his best friend. That's his guy. Fantastic football player. They were interested in him when he hit free agency a couple of years ago. He's a fantastic run defender. This is a guy who had over 100 tackles a few years ago. Like, I think him and Dex together would be monsters. Obviously, he's over there kissing his teammates on the forehead, but I think Dex would be cool with it. So I don't know. There's other guys you can bring them up, but those are some guys that come in my mind.
I mean, you covered the big guys. I think Jonathan Franklin Myers is perfect for this team, but man, I think he's going to be expensive. I mean, again, like the guys who are at the top of the free agency class, they tend to push numbers that people are astounded by. And they're like, I can't believe I got that. They got that. Well, they got that, and it happens every year. So would you be shocked if he pushed 20 million a year? I wouldn't,
Yeah, I wouldn't say shocked isn't the right word. I would be surprised, but not in the sense of like free agency always does this shit. I'd be like, yikes.
Who's a better football player, Jonathan Franklin Myers or Jordan Davis?
Yeah, I would say Myers.
Jordan Davis just got $26 million a year.
Insane. Yeah, you're right. I mean, Jordan Davis, I'd say is better at what he does, but what he does is limited.
I mean, people are celebrating the fact that Jordan Davis could like catch his breath long enough to get up to 60% of the snaps this year, right? And that was enough for him to get $26 million a year. Jonathan Franklin Myers he's a 3-down lineman who does all the same things without having to come off the field because he can't breathe.
Yeah.
And
I think he's a more impactful player.
I think he's a better pass rusher. He's just as good a run defender. He's a better pass rusher. You could argue Jordan Davis has more upside because of his physical traits, but one of his physical traits is he can't stay on the field properly.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if one guy's worth 26 million, I get it. He's younger, but still, if one guy's worth 26 million, I can see the other guy getting 20,
Yeah, I hear you. I mean, what you said is a $6 million difference. So what you're saying is correct. And I don't think it's that crazy, but we've talked about it a lot this last month where these guys just get paid about where they can be, not who they are today. And, but yeah, I mean, $6 million is probably a reasonable difference there, even with that considered.
Right. I don't think we're going to be in the Jonathan Franklin Myers sweepstakes at the end of the day. I just think there's too many holes to fill in this team where I think that's a luxury. Christian Wilkins is the obvious one because obviously he works well with Dex. They played together at Clemson. They're both sexual deviants. They would terrorize the league in ways that I cannot even begin to say.
Their shit talking is like the exact same. They're just
would we get demonetized? Are we even monetized other than super chats? Would we get demonetized if I talked about how the two of them would terrorize the NFL in ungodly ways? Like that would be
find out.
Yeah. Hey, Tyler Linderbaum, if you're thinking about signing with the Commanders, get ready for some really, really horrible moments. Christian Wilkins is the best player available, right? But the question is he healthy? I think he had another surgery in December. If I'm not mistaken, he had a Jones fracture of his foot and he had a complicated issue, whatever it was that led to him being released, that and all the weird stuff. Forget all the weird stuff because I don't care about that.
Yeah.
If his foot is fine and he's just trying to prove himself on a 1-year deal and he says there's nothing better than playing next to Dexter Lawrence to help my stock and I get to play with my buddy, that's a home run.
Yeah.
But he's got to be healthy. And I don't know what his health status is. I'm beginning to feel like it's a lot like the Asante Samuel Jr. situation from last year, where everybody's like, how is this guy not the top corner on everybody's list? Well, it's because he's hurt, right? And I feel like that's the same thing going on here.
I feel like that already happened though, in some sense. Like everyone was like, oh, like he's gonna come play for somebody, and then he just never did. He just never came back.
Never came back.
So I don't know. I feel like he might be healthy this time around. He's interesting.
He is interesting. Outside of Christian Wilkins, who, by the way, I think if we deem that he was healthy enough to invest in, I think he would get something in the territory of like a 1-year, $15 million deal or something like that.
Yeah.
I think it's yeah. And I'd be willing to give it to him if he was healthy, obviously.
You could throw a void year down if you're worried about the money being all in 1 year.
Like everything else, I'm looking at this kind of algorithmically. If you just want a solid, reliable, fix the problem, but don't break the bank option, I think Sebastian Joseph-Day is the easiest decision in the world here. He plays he's about a 60% snap guy, and he's a run stuffing demon. Like that's what he does. He's a lunch pail guy. Shows up, stops the run, eats doubles, does things like that. Plays 3 tech, plays that 0 to 3 role. Very, very good. Has worked with Jannard Wilson for 2 years. Knows the system. Could really help here. I almost expect him to get signed. I'd be kind of surprised if he didn't end up on the Giants. I don't think he's going to make a lot. I think people think he's going to make in the territory of like $6 million. Let me look it up. What they had. $8 million. Two for 16 is what the Athletic had him at. I think that sounds about right. But $8 million a year, something like that. I don't think that these guys generally push the cap. By the way, when I say people push the cap and they make more, I don't mean everybody. I mean the top guys. Like when the cap goes up, it's the NFL is a polarized system. The top guys take all that money, and then everybody else is left with what they're left with. He's not a top guy. He's a lunch pail guy. I think he'll get about that, like $7-8 million a year for a couple of years. I think he's a logical hire. A guy you didn't mention that I think will be a strong candidate to be here, who I think could help a lot, is Calais Campbell. He's 39 years old. Calais Campbell has been a defensive tackle in the NFL since the final year of George W. Bush's presidency. Okay. 2008 was his first year of the NFL. So that's how long he's been around, but he's still good. Like every year, dude, he's good. Now his snap count's going down. But he's still he had 524 snaps last year at the age of 39. And every year he's going down a little bit, but 500 and something snaps out of that guy. Like, what are you going to pay him? Like $4 or $5 million bucks?
Yeah. A lot. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up being like, one of those like veteran exceptions that you're talking about. Like,
shout out to the Big Blue Goon. Fan of the show.
Big time Goon. To everybody, we want to thank Goon for gracing us with his presence and not forgetting the little guys on his ascension to Twitter and NFL royalty. He's now followed by the NFL greats. The Goon is here, everybody. He hasn't gotten the Dane Brugler follow yet. That's when you'll stop paying attention to us.
I'll tell you. I would tell you to follow the Goon, but he doesn't give a shit if you follow him. He doesn't care anymore. He cares more about getting.
Recommend you don't follow him usually.
He doesn't really want you to. He's waiting on Roger Goodell to follow him, so you can tell him to where to shove it. All right, shout out Goon. So I think Calais Campbell makes a lot of sense. $5 million or so to bring him in here as a rotational guy. He's a Harbaugh guy. Bring him home, to Harbaugh. Let him help the team out. Here's an idea. What if you signed both Christian Wilkins and Calais Campbell.
Yeah,
I
see that. I don't think that that Christian will, or sorry, that Calais Campbell keeps you from signing anybody.
Right. And I think that's why he's a guy that I would love to have. He's kind of in that Demario Douglas discussion, like very old, but still very good. Hard hat guy, and he's going to help this team.
One thing really interesting for Sebastian Joseph-Day, I was looking at, at least a 50% run defense snap percentage, who were the top interior defensive linemen in the NFL for, and he was number 5 in run stop percentage at 11%.
He's outstanding. He's really a good football player. He's an under the radar football player, but he won't be under the radar to Denard Wilson, which is why I'd be very surprised if we don't sign him. Like when, again, you're assessing the defensive line, you're John Harbaugh, you turn to Denard Wilson. What are we doing to fix this? If Denard Wilson looks around, and I mean, you don't need to be a genius to say we need a run stuffer here. Who do you know? I know a guy, and like I think this is such a slam dunk decision that they just need to make it. And I want to hear this decision being made tomorrow or the next day. But I want Sebastian Joseph-Day on this team. I think he makes a lot of sense for us.
Yeah, and I just went back one more year. He was 6th the year before with a 10.4%.
He's solid, man. He's really good at what he does. So like, just to be clear, to get a guy that good in the draft, you're taking him probably in the 2nd round, latest in the 3rd round, right? Like that, these run stuffing DTs, they go pretty high actually.
Yeah, I could see him getting paid a little bit more than these guys think based off of just those numbers. Like these look what Dalvin's gotten paid like over these years. Dalvin's gotten in the mid teens constantly for being a great run defender.
Yeah, but Dalvin had more of a name recognition.
Sure.
Again, where you're drafted matters. Being an Alabama guy and being on the Giants and it matters, right? Like it does affect you, unfortunately.
But even if it's 12 a year, I could see.
Yeah, I wouldn't be shocked. But either way, I think he's a solid hire for the Giants. All right.
Yes,
and I would love to get the guy here. There are other guys quickly to mention. Logan Hall has been a good player since he got drafted. Another guy that's kind of a solid 3-tech. I think he's, he's still not quite there where we thought he would be coming out of college, but he's still a good player. I wouldn't mind him. He'd be right in that same range. I think $7-8 million a year. Roy Lopez is a guy that I don't know if you've watched his tape at all. He's a good player from the from the Lions. Another like $6 million, $7 million guy, but again, just a fat guy who stops the run. Does nothing fancy. Lunch bail, get up there, get in the guard's face, shut down the run. These guys don't necessarily cost a ton, but that's what I'm looking for, is a guy like that who's just a reliable run defender. Eat double teams, stop the run. That's your job. That's what we're looking for. It's a very specific job description. Anything above that is gravy.
Yep. Yeah, I agree.
All right. You want to move on to what's our next position here? Are we going to weapons now? Yeah, I'm not going to do safety. I don't think we're investing in safety in free agency personally, because we're already filled there, unless you want to say we're bringing back Dane Belton.
I mean, I guess we can throw out names real quick, not getting too much conversation. If we were gonna spend money there, I think Brian Cook from Kansas City would be the obvious connection with Dialoso, or however you say his name, our pet Delicio. And then our Darius Washington's, I think, another name to look at. I think KSIXI, he mentioned him for one of his predictions we were gonna sign. So just a couple of names to keep an eye on.
Okay. Shall we go to weapons?
Let's do weapons.
All right. So we're gonna lose Wan'Dale Robinson almost certainly, it sounds like. Malik Nabers is coming off an ACL. Cam Scadaboo's coming back from his foot, his fractured fibula, excuse me. Should be healthy. We have Tyrone Tracy. We have Cam Scadaboo in the run game. Devin Singletary accepted a pay cut down to vet minimum to stay as RB3 for now. So that's good. We saved some money there. We have nothing other than Malik Nabers and Darius Slayton right now on the wide receiver room. And I'm sorry, Gunner. Gunner signed. So he's Gunner. Gunner, new slot receiver. Why pay Wan'Dale when Gunner put up 100 yards against the Cowboys? Just explain to me why give Wan'Dale all that money. Anyway, so that's our room right now. And our tight ends obviously are right now. I think the only tight ends we have under contract are Theo Johnson and Thomas Fidone. Both Manhurts and Bellinger are both free agents. So let's talk about weapons, because it's too much to talk about each position without talking about it holistically. how are you approaching this from an offensive standpoint? If you're Matt Nagy and Brian Callahan sitting with John Harbaugh and Greg Roman, what are we doing here?
Personally, I'm gone where I've been before. Is I think tight end is a spot where I would spend my money as like the big target. I think that this is a really good tight end free agency. And I think that you could target one there. I think you could get a difference maker. I think that you could bring in an older guy and worry less about them breaking down. That is a position that tends to hold up for a while. I think, there's a guy you have connection to with Isaiah Likely. There's been mixed reports about would he come here, would he not come here. I've heard different things. We'll see how that falls at the end of the day. But that's personally where I'd spend it. I think at this point with Wan'Dale Robinson gone, and what these guys are being added, I think what we mentioned earlier, I think a little bit of that wide receiver by committee type thing is probably what they'll do. And then, look to see if they can make a splash in maybe the second round, maybe first round. Maybe that's something they'd be interested in the draft, but I think prepare yourself so you don't have to. And then running back position is clearly something it sounds like they are interested in targeting and making kind of that splash there. I don't personally align with that strategy, and we can get into that, what our thoughts are there. But that is something clearly that they're thinking. I just don't agree.
Well, I think what they're thinking here is a little bit of Moneyball, that the value is in the run game, and specifically in running backs in terms of the amount of yardage they give you and production, and potentially not just any running back, Monte, but the explosive play guys, right? Like, I think that's the difference here. The guys who can break open a play for you and open things up. Like Goon and I have had this conversation. We've actually been arguing with people on the timeline all week.
Yeah, I was arguing with Goon. Well, the Mexico.
Yeah, because you took time from Mexico to argue like the wrong position against Goon. Are we for real?
I was sitting at the bar arguing.
So you're just drinking and arguing?
Yes, correct.
All right. Well, Goon was not drinking. He was sober, I think, and he was arguing the right thing. So our argument has been very simple. Explosive plays coming out of the run game have become the new Moneyball inefficiency in the NFL, where defenses have adapted to taking away the pass game explosive play. You look at defenses like McDonald's modular defense. Every NFL defense is now going to gear up to try to create that kind of personnel grouping and take away those plays. It makes it really hard for quarterbacks to produce explosive plays with receivers. So where are you getting those explosive plays from? Where are you going to flip the field? You have an opportunity if you have I won't say elite, but a great athlete at running back who can do that for you to keep that defense honest. You also have that opportunity through your tight ends, your heavy personnel sets, guys who can stretch the middle. I think that's where the money is. And that's honestly where you get value right now. It's not wide receiver. It's actually in those positions. So let's just start there. You and I can disagree on whether it's running back or tight end, but I think we agree conceptually that that's probably where we're going to head, right? Bigger personnel, more emphasis on the run game, right? All right. So of the tight ends out there, we've heard rumors that in the beginning that, hey, Isaiah Likely didn't like John Harbaugh. He threw a party or something. That was a rumor coming out there that when Harbaugh left. Now we're beginning to hear that, no, that's not really the case. Maybe it isn't. Maybe it is. Maybe it isn't the case, right? Like you're hearing Isaiah Likely's name all of a sudden, especially today, connected to the Giants. Let's talk about him first, because I wasn't really thinking about him because I've just figured he wouldn't come here. But Isaiah Likely is, talk about going from little slot to big slot, Like, what do you think about Isaiah Likely as a possible target? Right now he's projected to make in the 3-year, $42 million range. He doesn't offer much as a blocker, but he is a very good receiving tight end in the mold of like an Evan Ingram type. What do you think about him?
Yeah, he's an interesting guy. He's somebody, look, I understood and believe that there might be rumors out there, but with how well Harbaugh has been keeping things silent, how well Harbaugh has done with managing his players, I wasn't willing to rule this out yet. And it seems like that's where we are, where it seems like this might be a chance of happening. And we can talk about some other tight ends that are also going to be good options, but I think Isaiah Likely is one of those guys who gives you a weapon. I think, I think tight end's another Moneyball approach. I think tight end you can get an absolute weapon out of here who can add to this. I think that's a position that Nagy valued. He spent a high pick on one. I think it's something that Harbaugh values, who also has spent high picks on the running back position, has paid tight end position, has paid the tight end position. So I think Isaiah Likely is a very good football player, and I think there's a few guys we can talk about here, but I'd be thrilled with Isaiah Likely.
Let's stay on the Ravens players for a second. Both Likely and Kolar were drafted in the same round, if I'm not mistaken. In fact, I think Kolar went first. So Charlie Kolar is also a free agent. Kolar is a guy that, you know, what did he come out of, Iowa? Or I think it was Iowa or Iowa State, one of the two. And has largely been a blocking back for them, but he was a good receiver in college, and he's beginning to show some signs of that. Because he hasn't been used in the receiving game as much, his projected value is like half of Likely. So the projected value for Likely on The Athletic, I'm using the Dan Popper article from last week, was 3 years, 42 million. I think 13, 14 million a year is probably about right for Isaiah Likely. The projected value for Kolar is 3 years, 21 million. Now, I don't think it'll be quite that low for Kolar. I think he'll be a little bit above that, but I don't think he's going to be in the territory of like 40 million, where he's making 14 million a year. I can see him making up to 10 million. So if you had to make a choice between those two, who's your preference? Kolar is the better blocker. Likely is the better receiver. He's more of a big slot. Where are you going with that money?
I think I'd go with Likely. I mean, I think there's a lot of value in having the receiving tight end, but I don't think that's hard to get.
You mean in terms of the
blocking? Sorry, yes.
Okay. I'm not sure about this. I think losing Wan'Dale makes it more intriguing to me to get Likely, because you can honestly play that role, and you can go into 12 personnel with him just sitting in the slot. But in any case, it's an interesting question. I know your favorite guy. I want to talk about him. You've been mentioning him for months as a target. Is Dallas Goedert?
Yep. Yeah, Dallas Goedert's one I'm really interested in. Like, I understand that there's been some injury issues with him. That's certainly something worth considering. But I think the age aspect of him is such an overrated part. Like, these guys tend to play forever at this tight end position. I think he fits into that mold. I think he kind of fits the mold a little bit of what the Washington did when they brought in like a guy like Zach Ertz. I think that, this guy's only 31. I think that this guy is a good blocker. He's a good receiver. He's very reliable. He's at times he's been a top 5 tight end in this league. I think he's come from a winning program. He's going to know how to lead. He knows how to show guys how to win around here. And I would love to bring him in, steal him from Philadelphia. I think that would be a little added bonus to it. And I think he would be a perfect go-to guy for Jackson Dart.
Health has been his kind of issue, right? Like he hasn't been able to fully stay healthy. And I think that's, again, like we talked about with the lineman, how much of a swing are you willing to take here on a guy who hasn't been fully healthy? I think it comes down to the dollar value, but I agree. If he's healthy, he's arguably the best tight end available if he's healthy.
Yeah.
Right. And I think they should definitely kick the tires on this one. He also has a deep connection to Bobby Skinner, which makes this a special pair.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. A couple more guys. Top of the market. Do you want Kyle Pitts? Yes or no?
Kyle Pitts got tagged, didn't he?
They tagged him?
I think so.
I didn't even realize that. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
All right. They tag Kyle Pitts. Are there mines? What do they pay him on the tag?
Nothing.
Really?
15 million. Yeah. Tight ends don't get paid anything in tags.
I didn't realize he got a tag. Okay. Never mind.
Yeah.
Okay. So 16 million. Okay, fine. Let's take him off. Good. I don't want him. Never did. A guy I want to mention, another receiving tight end who I think is going under the radar because he has had zero quarterback play since entering the NFL. A very good athlete out of Maryland, who I know John Harbaugh saw play at Maryland because he knows all the Maryland players. Chigga, remember him?
Yep.
Good player, man. He's a solid NFL player. He's an athlete, and he can play receiver well. This is a guy that I would take a shot on if I can get value here. I don't think there's enough of it's not like he's been dominant, right, in the NFL.
Yeah.
And a lot of that is QB play. Like he's had awful QB play his entire time in Tennessee. Like he's had nothing to work with at quarterback, but he's a good football player and he's got a lot of chops there. Similar production to Isaiah Likely, despite that, by the way, in terms of total yards and stuff, a little under, but a little bit more yak and a good player overall. They haven't projected on the Athletic as at 4 years, $46 million. I'd be shocked if he got over $10 million a year. You know, if I could get him under 10 a year, I think he's a guy I would absolutely try to take a high upside swing on.
Yeah, I think he's an interesting guy where I think you've pointed out, I think not having a quarterback has really hurt him. But, you know, if you look at him, his first year, his rookie year, he had a phenomenal year there. He really flashed as a top guy. And, you know, he had Tannehill. Tannehill was still playing pretty well then. But, you know, that's a guy who had 2.6 yards per route run as a rookie. And, you know, he still had, 1.3 this year, which is still pretty solid for the running back, for the tight end position. I'm sorry. And yeah, I think he's an interesting one. And, you mentioned Harbaugh, you mentioned Maryland and all that type of stuff. But the only thing that's worth thinking about here is, the other thing worth thinking about here is that Tim Kelly was his tight end coach in Tennessee as well. Our tight end coach.
Yeah, exactly. And not only that, his head coach is now our quarterback coach, and Brian Callahan, right? And like, so, Callahan, Tim Kelly, like there's connections there. Wouldn't be shocked if he's a candidate. Oh, wait, breaking news. Hold on. Got to share it. Thank you, Chris Rossetti. Angry NFL Insider, a renowned and trusted source out there, Monte's favorite poster on the timeline has says that Isaiah Likely is going to be a Giant tomorrow. Obviously.
Sucks. Now we're not getting him.
Definitely not getting Isaiah Likely. Sorry, folks. It's over. The dream is over. All right, Chig Okonkwo it is. Come on down, Chig. I really do like Chig Okonkwo, and I think he'd be a good hire. Couple other guys I want to mention that I think are worth talking about. There have been rumors about Kelsey. Do you think there's anything to this Kelsey stuff? Because I don't buy it.
No, but
just the Matt Nagy thing. That's where it's coming from, obviously. So,
I would say there's two aspects. I would put a very small percentage. I think if he's coming back to Kansas City. But there has been the idea he might come back and not to Kansas City. I'll make the pitch why the Giants make sense if that's to happen, but I don't think that's happening at all. I think the Matt Nagy thing, I think that's the most important thing here. But also, look,
Taylor Swift.
Taylor Swift. It's like Russell Wilson when you always talk about him coming to New York because of
which is why I don't want him. Yeah. Like, if you're coming here because you and your wife want to enjoy life in Manhattan, like I don't want you on my team. Not like no. Like I'm happy for him. You're going to the Hall of Fame. You're a top 3 tight end of all time. Like just right off into the sunset, man. Like I
don't think it's happening, but that's the only thing I would say is it could be the Sierra type effect and just the Matt Nagy stuff. I think it would make sense if he leaves. I just don't think he's leaving. 2
more guys very quickly. Noah Fant is a guy I personally like. I think he's a good player. Another guy who struggled because of QB play, honestly, in a lot of places he's been in. But a good overall player, might have value. They're projecting 2 years, $17 million. He has some chops as a receiver. And David Njoku, a guy a lot of Giant fans want. I don't want him. I feel like I've watched him. Like I just feel like I've watched him decline, and the injuries have taken their toll. Unless you feel like he's ready for a bounce back at the age of 30, but he obviously is the most accomplished of all of these people not named Kelsey. So, what do you think about Njoku?
Yeah, I've always thought kind of Njoku is a little bit overrated, but I think at this point he might be a value. I think that he is still going to be a quality starting tight end in this league, and I don't think he's going to cost a ton of money. So,
so you would go for him?
I would be open at the right price. But I think there's a lot of guys for one more name I'd throw out there. Some people mentioned in the chat. I know Goon's a big fan of him as well. I'm a fan of his. It's Cade Otton.
Sorry for him.
Yeah. He has played more snaps than just about any tight end in the NFL since he's gotten into the league. And he's a solid player. He's a good blocker. He's a really good pass blocker. I think he's an interesting target. I think he's an ascending guy.
I think if we don't get Jermaine Eluemunor, Cade Otton makes a lot more sense because he really is he's a safety valve for a right tackle. He's really one of the better pass blocking tight ends in this class right here. He's very good at it. And I feel like let's say you're rolling with Marcus Bowe at right tackle, which I don't think they would do anyway, but whoever it is, if it's not Jermaine Eluemunor, Cade Otton makes a lot of sense because you can run 12 personnel with Cade Otton on the field and feel very confident that, he can help you on the right side. And I think there's value there. So I think a lot of that to me is tied to whether or not Eluemunor comes back.
Yep, I agree.
All right. Let's move on to the other weapons. So shall we go to running back next?
Yeah, let's have the running back discussion.
All right. So again, you and I have argued about this. You and Goon have argued about this. Running back, whether or not to pay one. Obviously, Kenneth Walker is, the prized possession right now out there. And the Giants, I think it's real. I think they're interested in him. Is very real.
Yeah.
Whether you like it or not.
Ricky talked about it. It seems like, what Ricky said is that Kansas City was in the lead, but the Giants were in it.
The way I look at it is I think Kenneth Walker at a particular value is extremely valuable. So the value I would have placed on him is somewhere up to about $12, $13 million a year for let's say a 2-3 year deal. I think when you start pushing above that, then you really start wondering, what are you getting out of this guy? Is he really worth it? And I feel like what's going to happen is Kansas City, if we believe Ricky, and I do believe Ricky, they're probably pushing $15+ million a year because for them, it makes sense, right? They really need a running back and they can't sit back and wonder, is Jeremiah Love going to fall to them at pick 9? I think they need to solve the problem as best they can. They could take him and draft Jeremiah Love for all I know, but I think they're a team that's more likely to go ahead and pay him. And quite frankly, if they're going to give him that kind of money, let him go, right? Like you can't get into a bidding war over Kenneth Walker. I think that would be a huge mistake.
Yeah, I don't know. So this is what I'll say. I think that I understand some aspects, like me, Goon and I were discussing this. I understand the aspect of the running back position as people have overcorrected with this, and you can get value there and things along those lines. But I do think that there's a lot of the aspects that why the running back position became devalued in the first place that we can't forget about. I don't think Kenneth Walker is this exception at this position. I don't think you're signing Saquon Barkley. I don't think you're signing Christian McCaffrey. I don't think you're signing Derrick Henry. I think you're signing a good running back who had a fantastic year and absolutely was a huge reason they won the Super Bowl. And I also think that you're looking at a very smart Seattle front office who's saying, thank you for helping us win a Super Bowl, but thanks, go get your money somewhere else. And I think that there's a reason for that. I think this is a guy who's been often injured. Yes, he's only missed 10 games over his career, but that's from 6 different injuries. A lot of soft tissue injuries. Those tend to come up. I don't, like I said, I don't think he's an elite player. I think you're looking at a guy who's about to be 26 years old. And yes, you can find exceptions to the guys who haven't broken down on that, and I know it gets made fun of because Joe Shane brought it up and things like that. And Saquon Barkley has an exception, but I guess has he really? Because he kind of fell off the face of the earth after that one big year. Does that age matter at that drop off? And I think it does. I think that's still applicable, and that's something you have to think about. I think the ideal scenario where you're seeing these teams win is you're seeing them find good players in the draft and plugging them into a situation where these guys still have the juice in their legs, and it's the most replaceable position in the NFL where you're constantly finding starting running backs in the NFL. And I think not only that, where you're just talking about it in the sense of you could get that, I think you have gotten that. I think you have a guy in Cam Skattebo who was on track for 4 starts, on track for like 1,600 total yards and 20 touchdowns, was one of the best running backs in the NFL during that time. I understand, you brought out breakout percentage and things like, or breakaway percentage and things like that. He doesn't necessarily have that, but this is a guy who people thought that his game wouldn't translate to the NFL, so fell in the draft, but is one of the most prolific college running back seasons we've ever seen in college football. And you immediately saw that game that his play style transfer, despite people thinking it wouldn't, because he wouldn't be able to do stuff that he did in the NFL that he did in college. I think that Cam Skattebo is a guy who deserves the chance to prove that, coming off an injury that a lot of people are saying is not something that should be a problem for him moving forward. As brutal as the injury was, is honestly something that he's less likely to get than more likely with the bone growing back stronger, and not something that should affect him moving forward. I think this is a guy that you got a great value on. You should sit there and say, that's awesome. I got a great value. Yes, he might not have the longevity to play beyond his first contract with his play style, but he's also got a guy who's short of a drop, like a drop hip tackle that fucked up his ankle, has only missed a game one time in his entire career for injury. He's a tough son of a bitch who plays. And I think that you have a guy in Tyrone Tracy who, yes, has gotten overrated, but has gotten two back-to-back 1,000-yard scrimmage seasons, who's very capable of being your second running back. And I'm happy to add to this room, but I don't want to take a guy like Cam Skattebo off the field more than I have to. I think, play style aside and how good of a player I think he is, I think it was pretty clear we saw a different level of juice with Cam Skattebo and Jackson Dart in the field, and this team clearly fed off it. And when he got injured, it felt like the air and life got sucked out of this team. I think that those guys, bring a type of play style that I want to see this team lean into, not lean away from. And I think that the money can just be better spent. And I don't want to take Cam Skattebo off the field.
That was a 20-minute speech about why Cam Skattebo is good at football. Thank you very much, Monte. We like Cam Skattebo. That he wanted to get that off his chest. So I wanted to let you cook. We love Cam Skattebo. This has nothing to do with Cam Skattebo. This has to do with having bodies who can produce in the run game continuously and beat teams down and not overwork your guys. That's all it is. And having guys who I think complement each other well. I don't want another running back because I don't believe in Cam Skattebo. I want another running back because I don't believe in Tyrone Tracy. And and I don't care about the stats. I've watched him for 2 years. He is the least impactful stat compiling running back that I can think of. This guy looks great on paper, but when you need him and when he's a feature back and when the games count, I do not see Tyrone Tracy being anything more than running back 3. I don't want to get into a huge long argument. We've done it before, but I want an upgrade at the position. And you know who else wants an upgrade at the position? John Harbaugh. So we got to talk about it. You can't pretend it's not happening, right? Like, they're not going to get Kenneth Walker, I don't think. But there are better names out there that I think might complement the team better. The guy that I think both agree on would be a great addition would be Rico Dowdle, right?
That's the right price. Yep.
I'm going to skip Travis Etienne because I think he's in the same category as Walker. He's going to be expensive, and he's a feature back. And I think to your point, it hurts him
being cheaper, but we'll say.
But he's a feature back, right? Like, he's a guy that you're going to give the ball to 250 times, right? And I think that does impact your ability to give the ball to Skattebo. Rico Dowdle, on the other hand, is more of like 150 time, snap guy.
Mm-hmm.
Rico Dowdle is a guy who's 28, doesn't have the same mileage of guys his age because he hasn't been a full-time starter the whole time. And if you watched him last year in Carolina, man, he has juice. He really has juice.
I think he's going to get paid. That's my one concern, because that guy was nasty this year.
Right. 3.12 yards after contact per attempt, 35 missed tackles forced in just 273 snaps and 241 attempts. Like, this guy is a machine, right? In terms of breaking tackles, getting yards after contact, and he produces explosive plays. The value that people think he's going to get, like, this is The Athletic, is 2 years, $14 million. That I don't buy. But let's just be more realistic about it, because I think Rico Dowdle will be valued by the NFL. The way we're talking about the run game, I think everybody's talking about the run game, and he's a valuable piece. You think he'll push $10 million a year?
I do.
Okay. So would you give Rico Dowdle 2 years, $20 million? That's the question.
I wouldn't.
Why not? What would you give him? What would you be comfortable giving him?
I would give him RB2 money, which is like $5 million.
You're not going to get him.
Yeah, that's why. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I would. I'd happily give him I'd happily give him $8 to $10 million a year.
To me, if you're talking about replacing Tyrone Tracy, and I think he's perfectly capable of being a running back too, but that's a different discussion. We're getting RB2. We're talking about RB1s right now. Well,
I think there'd be 2 RB1s in this situation, and there's nothing wrong with that, having guys who split carries. And I think so. I get what you're saying, but at some point, adding an impact player is adding an impact player. Is he not an impact player on an offense?
Yeah, I mean, I get the argument for, like, if you're just getting him at a value, I can see going, like, I should say $5 million is like what I'm looking to pay for a running back in general for an RB2. Would I go $8 million for Rico Dowdle just because I think Rico Dowdle is a great player and you could bring him? Sure, I could make the argument, but I'd rather bring in J.K. Dobbins for $5 million, Rashad White for $5 million.
There's the next guy to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. So I think we both agree that Rico Dowdle is a great fit. The question is going to be the dollar amount.
I think he's going to get like 12 million. I do.
Okay, we'll see.
He was fantastic this season.
I don't know what he's going to get. I think if he's in that 8 to 10 range, I would like the Giants to be players for him. Obviously, if they were pursuing Walker, they're comfortable with money that you're not comfortable with, and so like I think that's where I think he might be a guy that they land on, but we'll see.
Mm-hmm.
J.K. Dobbins is actually the perfect complement to the two guys we have now. If you talk about efficiency, this is like pound for pound the most efficient running back there is on this class, right? I mean, 3.18 yards after contact per attempt. He had 32 missed tackles forced and just 153 attempts, which is bananas. Breakaway yards were 12 breakaway runs of 15 plus yards. He gets breakaways. He breaks tackles. He's good inside the tackle. He gets hurt a lot, and he cannot be relied upon to take over 200 carries. Guess what? He's not going to have 200 carries here on the Giants, right? With Cam Scadaboo and Tyrone Tracy, assuming those guys here, and Singletary for now, maybe his workload is 120 carries, something like that, 120 to 150 carries, right? Wouldn't you agree? Like somewhere in that range?
Yep.
I'm very comfortable with J.K. Dobbins at $5-6 million a year or less to just say, give me 150 carries. Come in and what is that per game? About it's not even like 10, like 9 carries a game. So basically like 2 series. Essentially, right? Like, can you give me one full series per half, or 2 series per half? Like, I'm very comfortable with J.K. Dobbins in that role.
Yeah, I mean, it depending how long the series is, obviously, but yeah, I mean, I think J.K. Dobbins is a good fit. I think he obviously he has the connection to John Harbaugh. He has a connection to Greg Roman. I think that's a guy that you could bring in, and I think would be a really good fit. That's the type of guy I'm looking at. That's the type of guy who I think you have Cam Scadaboo, and if you're giving him the majority of the carries, you're not sitting here saying, why the hell am I paying this guy this amount of money, and why I have Cam Scadaboo, who's clearly the best running back on this team, he's getting all his carries. While I think a guy like J.K. Dobbins, who does have enough juice to be that guy, could be and has a connection to this team. And the main thing, you're right, he gets injured too much. He does. But guess what? You have 3 very capable running backs on this team.
We're a team that can take that risk. That's the point.
Yep.
We're absolutely a team that can take the risk on him getting injured. I'm not worried about that part with him. The question is, are they interested? I'm going to skip through some guys and talk about a guy that will be brought up, although I don't think he belongs here, just because of connections. Rutgers guy, Jersey guy, Matt Nagy guy, Isaiah Pacheco. He's going to be thought about. He's going to be in the discussion. I don't think he's signing tomorrow. I'd be shocked. I think he's a guy who's going to linger till later. You've seen him. You've all seen him in Super Bowls, right? He's a feisty guy. He's a big runner. There's a lot of Cam Scadaboo in his game, right? Tries to run through people and stuff, but he doesn't have that same level of forced missed tackles or yards after contact. I mean, it looks good on TV and it's fun to watch, but from an efficiency standpoint, there's not a lot going on there. He's, he only averages 2.75 yards after contact, which is not great. Doesn't have a lot of breakaway yards or breakaway plays. He only had 1 run of more than 15 plus yards last year, 1 run the year before that of 15 plus yards, 25 total in his career. So he had 10 and 13 the first 2 years, and has not only had 2 in the last 2 years. I'm not interested in a guy like this personally, but I think he's going to be discussed. What do you think about Pacheco?
Yeah, it's a guy you have to bring up, but I think he's just cooked, man. I don't think he's the guy that he was when he was winning Super Bowls with them. I think he's a great example of the type of guy that, you can bring in, be a great value for your team, can give you that type of value throughout his rookie contract. And then you say goodbye to at the end of it, basically.
Rad ass, or am I in on Pacheco? He's a bit, no, I'm not. I think
Singletary mad about it, but I don't.
Devin Singletary is a better player than Isaiah Pacheco, and it's not even. I don't think it's even particularly close. He's a better pass blocker. He's a better receiver. He's a better runner. Gets more of his tackles, more efficient. Like just give me Singletary at that point. Let him stay here.
I agree. What's your thought on Rashad White?
stiff, a stiff runner. I don't think he has much in terms of breakaway speed at this point, and never really did. He's a solid. He's just a workhorse guy, and I respect it. But is that what I'm looking for right now? Not necessarily. So I respect his game, but I don't like the fit. That's my take on him. What about you?
Yeah, I'm not a huge Rachaad White guy. I think he's interesting. I think he has juice. I think he's a good receiver, and I think he can bring those aspects. And I think those are two things you're probably looking for in a guy in this system. But I don't think he's a good runner. I think that he's a guy who's consistently average under 4 yards per carry. He doesn't force those missed tackles,
and that's with some great O lines out there in Tampa
and great schemes.
Right. So I'm not thoroughly impressed by him, to be honest. I wouldn't bet on that one. All right. Anybody else want to talk about running back before we jump into receiver?
No, I'm good.
By the way, thank you guys for being here. We're over 4,000 total viewers right now, which is wild when you include YouTube and Twitter. And we were pushing about 100 viewers on YouTube earlier. We're hanging around 80, 90. So thank you guys. And if you haven't already, please hit the like button and subscribe to the pod. We appreciate you guys. And you're sticking around for the whole 2-hour plus pod. So let's keep going.
God bless you.
Last position group before you guys go to bed and wake up to all the chaos. Wide receiver. We're going to lose Wan'Dale. Let's be real. He's out of here. We have Malik Nabers. We have Darius Slayton for now. I'm still not convinced he's a giant for long. And you got Gunnar Olszewski. So the easy thing is, do you bring back a guy like Isaiah Hodgins to be a fifth receiver and a special teams guy on a vet min?
Sure. I mean, you give him a chance to compete to make the team. I think the question here becomes, let's assume Wan'Dale's gone. Is there any guy who you could think is like a true wide receiver too? Like a true low end wide receiver one, like a top 32 player, right? Technically a wide receiver one, but and
how much you want to spend? Because I got a name for you and you have the same name.
There's a couple guys, but what do you got?
So I wouldn't do a multi-year deal on any of these guys. Let me start with that. I don't think anybody in this class is worth a multi-year wide receiver 1-2 deal, including Wan'Dale, by the way. So I would take a swing on an older guy. To me, the best receiver in this class is Mike Evans. And I don't think it's even really close. Mike Evans is the best receiver in this wide receiver group, in this free agency group. He's a future Hall of Famer, right?
Yeah.
I mean, this is the first year in his career he didn't touch 1,000 yards, I think. And that's because of injury.
The most consistent wide receiver since fucking Jerry Rice, potentially.
Right.
Obviously not the highs, but consistency wise.
Just consistent, big X receiver on the outside, very good route runner, solid hands, even to this day and age, right? Maybe he's lost a little bit on his fastball, but he's still a really good player. I wouldn't be upset if they took a 1-year swing on Mike Evans. Now, again, it's a big money allocation. You're talking about 20 something million, probably. But if you're going to spend 20 something million on anybody, I'd rather give it to Mike Evans for 1 year than commit multiple years to any of these other guys. That's how I feel.
Yeah. We were talking about this earlier, and I don't think Mike Evans is leaving Tampa Bay at the end of the day.
I don't know.
That's how I feel. But we still have to discuss it just in case he does. And, I think you look at the guys that he's played with over the careers. You look at, the type of play style Johnny Manziel had in college. You look at the type of play style Baker Mayfield has today in the NFL. You can kind of start to see the natural fit for a guy like Jackson Dart with a guy like Mike Evans. I think you look at the type of receivers that John Harbaugh and Eric DeCosta have brought in Baltimore, and you see them, usually for the worst, get granted, and has not really worked out for them, but have brought in these Hall of Fame wide receivers towards the end of their career and, try to see if they had any juice left in them. I think Mike Evans actually does. And it's to what we've talked about before, Sal, is again, there's guys like Alec Pierce who's going to get upwards of 30 million, it sounds like.
Which is nuts, by the way.
Nuts.
That's insane.
And where I sit here is what I say is you're going to pay Alex Pierce that much money. You're going to lock him up. And I'm going to tell you what's going to happen is because he's making that amount of money, you're going to end up having to move on from him because he's not going to be worth the contract anymore. And he's going to end up being probably helping your team for as long as Mike Evans is going to help somebody's team for. And Mike Evans is a better football player. So just sign the older guy, get
sign the better player. If that's what you want, just sign the better guy. That's all.
Yeah.
You know?
So again, I don't think he's leaving, but he's the guy I'd pay. I wouldn't pay Alec Pierce. Mike Evans, I think I would. And then I don't, the only other name, I guess, where do you stand on Deebo Samuel?
No, I don't want him. He's cooked. I mean, he looks completely washed.
I agree with you. I was just like, that's the one guy you could argue is like, a high-end wide receiver too.
So my approach to wide receiver, because we prefaced this earlier by saying wide receiver by committee, whether you like it or not, is likely where this is headed. That it's Malik and everybody else, and the best way to hedge against Malik not being fully healthy is to have a bunch of guys rather than having one guy, right? And I think that's where this is going. So quite frankly, I'm not expecting a wide receiver signing by the Giants tomorrow or the next day, maybe later this week. I think this is second, third wave signings, in my opinion, for wide receiver. I think we might see a running back tomorrow. I think we might even see a tight end tomorrow, but I'd be surprised if they signed a wide receiver tomorrow, and I think they're looking at guys later. So Mike Evans is the one guy personally. In fact, he's the only guy that I would consider as like an early signing. Outside of that, I'm out. I don't want to take a chance. Yeah. I know people like Alec Pierce. He's a good player. I am not interested in finding out what he is for the money that he's going to get. Let somebody else pay him. Seriously. Like, I'm okay with missing on that.
Romeo Dobbs is getting thrown out in the chat. He's a solid player, but I think these guys get overpaid.
There are definitely guys that we need to talk about that I think they're going to sign someone, right? They're not going to go into the draft with nobody. So if you go by committee, let's just assume for a second you have Gunner and you sign, let's just say Isaiah Hodgins is a guy who's going to compete for a job. Okay. And you have Malik, obviously. If you sign a tight end, which I think they will, we both believe they're going to sign a tight end who's going to help in the receiving room. That's going to take some of the burden off of this, but and I think they're going to go for a receiving tight end personally. I agree with you on that. What are you looking for? What are the traits you're looking for in a receiver right now? And the guys you're looking for from this committee?
I think I'm adding a couple different types of guys. I think that's what I'm doing. I think I'm prepared. I think I'm adding another slot to this room because we're losing a slot, and I want somebody who can help out there. I probably want a burner. Depending on what you're going to do with Slayton, at least Slayton can be your burner if you're keeping him. But if not, I want a burner. I want a guy who can give me that, and then I probably want a big body. And those are the three type of guys I'm looking for. I mentioned earlier when Anthony asked me what my surprise signing would be, and I could easily see Darnell Mooney being the burner of the guy, the cheap burner of the room. And then you go from there. You mentioned Isaiah Hodgins, that could be the body, and then you could talk about like a Christian Kirk, who has a relationship with some guys on this coaching staff, like Chad Hall in Jacksonville. He could be, your shifty slot guy. You're more your savvy route runner. There's a lot of combinations we could go here, but I think that's the type of room I would look for them to build.
I just want to cheer up everybody's mood with some good news for those of you who have money invested in the market. The S&P futures market is down again and has lost $1.3 trillion already today. Just want to let you know that.
Hopefully Giants free agency goes better.
Anyway. All right. So I agree with you. I think you need a committee where you have a burner, you have a body, you have a slot, right?
And you can do that through the draft too.
Yeah. But I think you're going to get one of each. So I see the name in the chat. I brought him up before. K-Max bringing it up here. Jalen Nailor is a guy I think they should really think about. I think there's value in Jalen Nailor. I don't know what he's going to get on the market. The Athletic had him at 3 years, $36 million. That's a lot of money for Jalen Nailor. I don't know if he has the body of work to support that kind of pay. And I'm okay not giving him that. But if you get him for cheaper, I would take Jalen Nailor. I think he's a good route runner. I think he's ascending. He looks like he's just going to be a solid player. And, he's one of these guys where I think you can plug him in and he's your slot receiver with a little bit of outside versatility, and he's good for like 500 to 600 yards a year pretty solidly. I think that's kind of what he is, and I'm okay with that, right? Now the price point matters. Are you going to give him $12 million a year? I don't know. I don't think he's worth that, but we'll see. The other guy that I think for a burner perspective you're missing, which I think is an obvious
a lot of burners.
Right, but the one guy who is an obvious one is Tyquan Thornton, because of his connection to Matt Nagy, and he played well in his limited play this year with Kansas City. He showed something. He finally showed some of that talent. It might have just been a flash in the pan. He really didn't do anything in New England, but he's a guy that clearly is lobbying to come to the Giants. Like he wants to be here with Matt Nagy, wants a job here. I can't imagine he costs anything. What do you think that guy makes? Like $3-4 million, something like that? What do you think?
I could see him getting over 5. I could see him people betting on his upside.
All right.
But I'm not saying he will. I'm just saying it could happen.
Okay. I think the price point matters. The Athletic had him at 1 year, $10 million. I'm like, $10 million for this guy. I have a hard time believing.
Yeah, I could see him getting like a, like what Paris Campbell got, like that type of thing.
$6 million a year.
Yeah.
6-7 million. I'm okay with that, right? Like for Tyquan Thornton for a year. I think that's one as a burner.
Yeah. I'd prefer to like just go where's the deal at that burner? Because there's a lot of burner. A guy like I know you're not a big fan of him, but another guy's connection is like a Marquise Brown. He could be your burner.
Yeah.
He has the Ravens connection. He has a Matt Nagy connection. You look at a guy like Calvin Austin. He could be your burner. Like there's guys out there.
The slot. There's a guy who I think is being undervalued. Actually,
sure.
I'm actually surprised, and I think it's because of where I think he's a victim of circumstance. But Jahan Dotson was a really good receiver coming out of Penn State, first round pick, right? It was like a top 20 pick, in fact.
Yeah, he was.
Went to the Commanders. Actually, had a couple of good years. He had like plus like 500-600 yards the first couple of years. Had a bunch of touchdowns, and then they drafted Jaden Daniels, and he just fell out of the offense essentially for whatever reason with the new regime, right? Like he just didn't fit with what they were trying to do with Cliff Kingsbury, and they basically reduced his production and his access to plays, and then they traded him, and he goes to Philly, and he basically is just buried, behind other guys. And it's hard to be a slot receiver who lives over the middle with a quarterback like Jalen Hurts who can't see anything inside the hash marks. And that's real. I'm not just taking a shit on Jalen Hurts. That's the reality of his game. He does not use the middle of the field much at all, and his production is crap. Partially because of that, and to some extent because of how Jaden Daniels was using him and how that offense in Washington was using him. I think there's more there. There's quite a bit of talent from his Penn State tape and his early years. I would take a swing on Jahan Dotson. I think there's a much better player than people are giving him credit for because of the last few years here. And I think that's talk about a guy who can run routes. Now he's a slot pretty much only, right? I don't think he's much more than that, but he's a better slot inside outside guy than Wan'Dale would have been, in my opinion, if you want to use him that way. And like at least he has the potential to be. I would be very happy to have Jahan Dotson and say, I think you're a victim of circumstance. I'm going to get you on the cheap and put you on a team that could use you, and you'll get a lot of targets here over the middle. We'll find space for you and you'll cook. So that's someone I hope they actually take a swing on.
Yeah, that's another interesting game. I'm curious what they do there. And then I think the one other thing that's worth mentioning, I think it's valid for any of the positions we've talked about. We've heard a lot of trade talks, and I'm curious if wide receiver, because we've mentioned it's just committee or maybe Mike Evans. Is there an in between where they make a move? Do they make a move for a guy like a Michael Pittman or something along those lines?
If he gets cut,
or
if Pittman gets, I think he's going to get cut. I think they're going to.
I don't know if he does without Pierce.
Well, if Pierce leaves, I think they won't cut him. But if they try to keep Pierce, I think that he's gone. I think that's the situation. So, you're not getting access to him either way if Pierce is gone.
Yeah.
But in the world where they find a way to keep Pierce, which I don't know if they will or won't, but if they don't, if they do keep him, I think that they almost have to cut him. They'll try to trade him, but I don't know what they're going to get for him at that point, So he's somebody I would be interested in. Rashid Shaheed is another guy that people have brought up, and he's an interesting player. I think there's more talent there than has been used so far in the NFL, but What he is an outstanding returner and a speed guy. I think he can run routes. I've seen him run enough routes where I feel like he has a decent enough route tree that you can make use of it. The question is what you're willing to pay for it, because he's not been a complete receiver in his NFL career so far. So what, I've seen numbers, everything from like a few $1,000,000 up to like 16, 17 million a year on him. What's your comfort level with Shaheed? Do you want him? Yes or no? And what would you be willing to pay him?
I'd pay him for the right price. He could be my burner. I think he'd be the best version of the burners we're talking about. I would pay him. I'd be pretty comfortable paying him like in that 12 million area, 12, 14 maybe. I'd feel okay about that, especially if you can move on from Slayton. I'd be pretty comfortable with that. I think he's going to get the 16, 18. I really do. I think that there's going to be teams that I think there's a lot of juice there. What's team you think?
The Raiders. He's been with Clint Kubiak for the last couple of years. Clint Kubiak traded for him. You had him in New Orleans. The Raiders have money to spend. They need targets for. They need a speed guy. So I'm pretty sure he's heading to the Raiders.
That's a good one. I had a match made in heaven in my mind. I'd love to see that man play with Josh Allen.
Well, they just traded for DJ Moore.
That's true. You're right. You're right.
I'm
ridiculous, by the way.
I'd be very surprised if Rashid Shaheed didn't get a deal from the Raiders tomorrow. Right. I actually think he's going to get overpaid by the Raiders.
And I think look what they traded for him. Like this league values him. I think he's going to get 16 to 18 million.
Yeah. I think you're probably right. I think it's closer to that than it is to like a few $1,000,000, But I think the Raiders I think Kubiak needs receivers out there, man. They've got Brock Bowers, they've got Genty, they're going to invest in the O-line. They're going to need somebody else to throw the ball to right now and before the draft. So I do think that he's going there, but he's an interesting person. Dash, if he's in here, has brought up Calvin Austin over and over again. He's actually fought with Jabri over it. It's really funny to watch them argue about Calvin Austin. When Calvin Austin came out, he was being compared to Wan'Dale when they came out. They're both smaller guys and speed guy. Well, he's more of a speed guy.
Yeah,
and he's more of a vertical stretcher than Wan'Dale. Wan'Dale's a better route runner. And a better underneath guy. But what do you think about a guy like Austin? Do you see him having a role on a team like this?
Yeah, I think he could be the field stretcher we're talking about. I'd be fine with adding him, but on the cheaper end.
I don't know if I want a 5'9" field stretcher.
Yeah, he's been doing it though, man. He's figured it out.
Yeah. Well, there's a bunch of other guys we can go through, but I think like you're talking about by committee, right? In my mind, you're not paying for Shaheed at 16 million. You're not paying for Pierce at 27 million. You're probably not paying for Mike Evans. I think what you're doing is you're collecting guys. All right. So I think guys like Naylor, Dotson, Thornton, Kirk, like these are the kind of guys that we're going to be collecting, to put in the room to head into the draft, because you don't want to head into the draft with a big need anywhere, especially not a wide receiver here. And I think they're going to get a bunch of guys to say, look, we have a competent stable of receivers that we can develop an offense around, and a tight end who's a real threat in addition to Theo Johnson. I think that's going to be their goal. And I think it's just going to be collecting these, like this committee and saying, we're good to go. If Malik is not ready to go, we'll have an offense that can play without him, including a big run game, which is, I think, where the emphasis is going to be. But in case, you need to, even with Malik, you can rotate all these guys. I think that's the plan.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that there's a real high chance that if they go this way, they're going to try to target wide receiver in the second round. I think there's going to be a lot of names there, but the idea is that you don't have to do that. You can trade down if you want to. There's a good opportunity there, and you're not feeling like, oh, I'm going to miss out on wide receiver if I do it. And you have Malik Nabers at the end of the day to be your one for this.
And Jay Hernandez, I'm putting up this message because this has been my mantra the whole time. You should not look at the draft or go into the draft with significant holes to fill and needs to fill, because that's how you end up staying a bad team forever, is you keep trying to plug holes in the draft. And that's, I think, important to remember. You want to go into the draft, in my mind, ideally with your roster set. Like, I've got my roster set. I don't need these draft picks. Like, if there wasn't a draft, I can put together a good football team and compete for wins next year. That has to be the goal starting tonight, tomorrow. They've got to field a complete team, which is why you can't spend $1 billion on one or two guys. You've got to space this out and fill up this roster. In my mind, I think that's the right way to do this. Get the roster fixed in terms of just having competent, valuable, quality players up and down. And then you walk into the draft without need, and you can just sit back and say, I don't care what position this guy plays. If he's the best player, if he's an impact guy, I'm taking him. And I think that's the goal here. That's the goal of the next week or two, is to position yourself for the draft where that's how you're thinking in the draft. You want freedom in the draft. You don't want to have to plug holes. So I think that's important.
Oh, no, it's another name that I think is worth an interesting one to mention. He's definitely on the tail end, but Curtis Samuel got cut. That's an interesting name to potentially bring in. He's a good committee guy.
Yeah, I mean, again, there's a bunch of these guys, right? I think one of the advantages of having Malik Nabers here is you can do this around Malik Nabers. And to some extent, the Giants tried to do that. The problem is that Darius Slayton sold, right? I mean, that, like, you can't have a committee where, like, the next man up completely fails you and abandons ship the second he's called up. And I'm going to call him out. I know he's Mr. Good Guy and all that. The way he played in that New Orleans game the week after Malik went down was one of the most embarrassing things I've ever seen from an NFL player. The Giants have given you 3 contracts, and this was your moment to step up and help your rookie quarterback and help your team when they needed you. And all you did was drop the football over and over again and fumble the football and just show up as small as possible and then tap out. Like, I'm sorry. You need to get this guy off this team. I can't, like, good luck to you. I have nothing against the guy on a personal level. It's not personal. He needs to be off this fucking team. Like, I cannot stand to watch this anymore. You cannot have a room where you're relying on guys behind Malik Nabers, where one of the leaders, the captains, does that shit. Get him out of here and get 3 or 4 more new guys who are just going to lunch pail this shit and get this team rolling. That's what I want.
He is, in theory, a value to a team. If you just trade for him for nothing based off his contract, you're going to see what these wide receivers are going to get paid. But his time here is done. We need to move on. He can't be the most tenured player on this team.
If guys like Rashid Shaheed are going to get $16, $17 million and Alec Pierce is going to get $27, $28 million, I find it hard to believe that some team won't give you a 7th round pick swap or a 7th round pick just to take Darius Slayton off your hands for $10 million.
That's what I'm saying. Look, our opinions aside, I think a lot is just he's the most tenured guy here. You made him a captain, and that's just no captain. It's just not the right. It's not the right guy to be looked up as a leader in this team. Now, he's a bad guy. He's just not reliable.
He's a great guy. That's not the point. He's not a captain. The fact that he's a captain tells you a lot about. Yeah, their results make sense to me. The way they play makes sense, because if you have captains like that who don't instill any kind of professional standards in their teammates because they can't uphold them themselves when it matters, you're not going to win any football games. And I don't want to be too harsh on the guy because he's a nice guy and all that, but you can't create a new culture of winning here with guys like that hanging around. Joe Schoen should have dumped him the first chance he got, and he just held on to him for dear life. And here he is, still here. He's still here 4 fucking years later. He's still here. It's time to let him go.
The guys cannot be looking to Darius Slayton to uplift them and support them. That's not the right guy. He's not a winner. He's never been a part of a winning organization. He needs to go to somewhere where he can look to a guy who's a winner, and maybe he can they can show up and make him show up, but not the other way around.
No, absolutely. And I don't want to get into too much, but my God, the fucking the propaganda to keep this guy here like he was something special, like when it was very obvious, like there was something wrong, right? And like it was all because he was just a nice guy, right? It's just time to let go. Anyway, that's my Slayton high horse, and that's a happy place to end this, I think, unless you have anything else to close this sucker out.
No, it's been a long one, but it's been a fun one. We're almost at 5,000. We'll see if we get there before we close out. But man, thank you everybody for coming out and watching us talk about this. And I'm excited to experience this with all you guys tomorrow.
Yeah, we appreciate all of you guys. Once again, thank you for being here. Please hit the like button if you haven't before you leave. Hit the like button and subscribe to He's a Giant Pod on YouTube. And if you get a chance, please share the episode, share the links with your friends on Twitter, Facebook, whatever the hell you guys use. I don't care. And yeah, like, let's go, guys. Like, we wanted to get this to you before the craziness starts. Remember, 12 o'clock tomorrow is when the official legal tampering period starts. And I think you're going to start hearing a lot of mayhem around the league. It usually happens like almost immediately at 12 o'clock. At the strike of 12, you hear all this stuff crack. What are we looking for as a team? We're looking to see if Jermaine Eluemunor and Cor'Dale Flott are retained tomorrow. Before then, hopefully we hear that news. I'm hoping for that. But this is the beginning of something new. I'm pretty pumped, Monte. I don't know when we're going to go back again. We might be back here on Wednesday for our regular episode. I think we probably will be.
But catch us in Spaces. I'm sure Base will do one tomorrow. So we'll be there talking.
All right. Well, thank you guys for being here. So it's probably our longest episode ever, but it was a lot of fun. It might be. That's hard for us to do, but it was a fun one.
Or when we kept Mount Waldman for 3 hours.
Yeah, but this was more fun because we're raging. Whatever it is, we're on our way, gentlemen and ladies. If you're in here, this is the beginning of something great. This team is going to win a Super Bowl. I'm so confident that this team is going to win a Super Bowl in the next couple of years. So this is the beginning of it. Let's go get this. We'll see you guys in a few days. Until then, go Giants.
Go Giants.